In Victorian London, over 900,000 people were crammed into illegal, disease-riddled housing, while 38,000 more suffered nightly in common lodging houses where beds were still warm from the previous occupant and your neighbour might be a thief, a prostitute, or Jack the Ripper's next victim. Here's what life was really like in the dreaded Victorian doss houses. Before we start, if these stories help you sleep, a like or subscribe would really help. I'm curious, where are you listening from? Drop your location and time in the comments. Sometimes I see someone from Tokyo listening while I'm recording this at night in the States. And the time zone thing never stops being weird to me. Alright, tonight it's Victorian doss houses, but before we go anywhere, get comfortable, like actually comfortable. Pillows good? Blankets situation handled? Perfect. Trust me on this one. The rain beats against the grimy windows of Whitechapel. It's 1888, and you're standing on the street soaked to the bone. You've got 4 pennies in your pocket. 4 copper pennies. The difference between sleeping in a bed tonight or wandering the freezing streets until dawn. In front of you stands a building with a large lantern hanging over the door, the universal sign of a common lodging house, a doss house they call it. The building itself looks like it might collapse at any moment, all sagging wood and cracked brick, but tonight it's either this or nothing. "You coming in or what? Not keeping the door open all night?" barks a voice from inside. The smell hits you first. It's like nothing you've experienced before. A cocktail of unwashed bodies, boiled cabbage, tobacco, damp clothing, and something underneath it all that makes your stomach turn. Something rotten. You actually stagger backward for a moment, and the doorman, a burly fellow with a face like crumpled paper, laughs. "First time, eh? You'll get used to it, or you won't and you'll be back on the street. 4 pence for the night." You dig into your pocket, pulling out the 4 precious pennies. They represent your entire day's work, sweeping streets from dawn till dusk. 4 pennies that could have bought food, but shelter wins tonight. Your stomach can wait. "Down the steps," he says, pointing to a staircase that descends into what looks like absolute darkness. "Kitchen's down there. Beds don't open till 8. Wait, did you hear that right? The doorkeeper just casually mentioned that the beds don't open until 8 o'clock. See, doss houses operate on a strict schedule. They kick everyone out by 10 a.m. Then the rooms are supposed to get aired out, though that usually just means the doors get opened for an hour, while the sheets stay exactly as they are, festering with whatever the previous occupants left behind. You follow the worn wooden steps down into what feels like the bowels of the earth. Each step creaks and groans, protesting under your weight. The walls are damp to the touch, covered in a film that you don't want to identify. As you descend, the noise grows. Voices, coughing, someone laughing maniacally. The steps finally open into a basement room that stretches the length of the building. Okay, so picture this basement kitchen, 2 large rooms, dimly lit with gas lamps that give everything a sickly yellow glow. The air is thick with smoke from both the cooking fires and dozens of tobacco pipes. Long wooden tables, scarred and stained from years of use, line the room. Men sit hunched over them, eating in near silence. The quiet is unnerving. You'd expect a room with 50 people to be loud, but there's an atmosphere of resignation, like everyone's too tired to talk, too beaten down. "You can cook if you've got food," says a thin man who materializes beside you. "Fires are free to use, but watch your stuff. Anything left unattended disappears faster than a virgin at a sailor's party." Your eyes adjust to the gloom and you take in the scene more fully. The men around you are a catalogue of misery. Some wear clothes that were once fine but are now patched and frayed. The formerly middle class who've fallen on hard times. Others are clearly labourers, their bodies bent from years of back-breaking work. A few look like they haven't been sober in years, eyes vacant and hands trembling. First night? Asks the thin man, who introduces himself as Barney. He's missing several teeth and what remains are brown stubs. Is it that obvious, you ask? You've still got hope in your eyes, he says with a sad smile. Won't last long here. As you stand awkwardly, wondering where to sit, you notice a workman sitting alone. He places a handful of salt directly on the dirty table surface. Then, to your astonishment, he begins dipping his bread into it, bite by bite, washing each mouthful down with tea from a chip mug. That's his butter? Barney explains, following your gaze. Salt's cheaper than butter or dripping. Man's a genius, if you ask me. The salt as butter trick isn't even the most depressing thing you see in the next hour. A man in the corner is carefully picking maggots out of a piece of fish before eating what remains. Another is watering down his tea with hot water to make it last longer. Got anything to eat yourself, by and say? Me bunny class trains, you shake your head. The knees went to the bed. Thought not. He pulls a crust of bread from his coat. Here, can't work tomorrow if you don't eat tonight. You're so hungry you don't question this unexpected kindness. You take the bread and bite into it, trying not to think about where it's been or how long Barney's had it in his pocket. Why is it so quiet? You whisper, uncomfortable with the lack of conversation. Would you have much to say if this was your life? Barney gestures around. Besides, talking gets you noticed. Getting noticed gets you in trouble. See that fellow by the fire? He subtly points to a heavy-set man with a scar running from his eye to his mouth. He's a fence, buys stolen goods. That skinny one by the door, pickpocket. The old man in the corner's been in and out of prison for 40 years. Best to keep your mouth shut and your eyes down. The heat in the basement kitchen is stifling despite the dampness. Sweat trickles down your back as you finish the bread. The smell that initially shocked you has already started to fade from your awareness. The human nose adapts quickly, a blessing and a curse in a place like this. Smoking rooms upstairs if you want, says Barney. Bit livelier up there. You follow him back up the stairs, past the entrance, and into another room on the ground floor. Here the atmosphere is indeed different. Two small billiard tables dominate the centre, surrounded by men waiting their turn. Others sit on benches along the walls, some mending clothes, some reading tattered newspapers, most smoking pipes that fill the air with a blue haze. The contrast between the men is striking. The younger ones, mostly in their 20s and 30s, are animated, laughing, even playing games. The older men sit apart, faces drawn and grim, barely speaking. Young ones still think things might get better, Barney says, noticing your observation. Old ones know better. On the walls are posted rules and notices, many worded in ways that make you wince. No spitting on the floor, use the spittoons or get out, reads one. Thieves will be handed to police, warns another, though suspect that's an empty threat given what Barney told you about your fellow lodgers. What time is bed, you ask, already exhausted from your day of work. Doors open at 8, lights out at 10, Barney explains, and when they say lights out, they mean it. Total darkness, no exceptions. You get your cabin number when you check in downstairs. A cabin. The word conjures images of cosy wooden structures in forests. The reality, as you'll soon discover, is very different. 8 o'clock comes and there's a subtle shift in the room's energy. Men begin to move towards stairs. You follow, clutching the brass token you were given when you paid your 4 pennies. It has a number scratched into it, 237. At the bottom of the stairs stands a huge man, built like a prize fighter gone to seed. Token, he demands from each person. When it's your turn, you hand over your brass check and he consults a dirty ledger. 237, top floor, 3rd from the left. Up you go, climbing 3 flights of narrow stairs. Each floor you pass reveals the same scene, a large open room filled with what look like wooden boxes. Men move between them, some already settling in for the night. Like a human filing cabinet, mutters someone behind you. When you reach the top floor, breathless from the climb, you count along until you find cabin 237, and now you understand the filing cabinet comment. Picture a room the size of a small barn, and inside it, dozens of wooden partitions creating tiny cells, each about 7 feet high. There are no ceilings to these cells, just the 4 walls. Inside each is a narrow bed and just enough floor space to stand beside it. The walls don't even reach all the way to the ceiling of the main room. They stop about a foot short, presumably for air circulation. Your cabin is barely the size of a closet. The bed fills most of it, a thin mattress on a metal frame with sheets that look like they've seen better days, though they're not as filthy as you expected. There's a small shelf on the wall and a hook for your clothes. That's it. That's what 4 pennies buys you. Could be worse, says a voice. And you turn to see Barney has the cabin next to yours. Private doss houses don't even have these dividers, just rows of beds, sometimes 2 or 3 people to a bed. As you sit on your bed, it creaks alarmingly. Through the thin walls you can hear everything. Men coughing, snoring, talking, crying. A man 2 cabins down is praying in whispers. Someone else is clearly drunk, slurring curses at no one in particular. How do people sleep with all this noise, you ask? Exhaustion is a powerful sedative, Barney says. Trust me, you'll sleep. He's right about one thing, you're bone-tired. But as you lie down, another unpleasant reality becomes clear. The mattress is alive with tiny movements. Bed bugs. Lots of them. Unlike your soft mattress right now, this Victorian bed is a battleground. You're not just trying to sleep, you're trying to minimize how much of your blood you donate to the insect population tonight. You sit up quickly, consider your options. Sleeping in your clothes might provide some protection. You can also tuck the sheets in tightly, creating a barrier. Neither will work perfectly, but it's better than nothing. As you're contemplating this, a bell rings loudly, echoing through the building. 10 minutes to lights out, calls a voice from below. Men scramble to finish whatever they're doing, washing faces in shared basins, changing clothes, securing what few valuables they have. You notice many are hiding their boots under their pillows or tucking them beneath the bed frame in ways that would make them difficult to grab quickly. Your boots are your livelihood, Barney explains, seeing you watch. No boots, no work, no food, no food. He trails off, the conclusion obvious. Another bell rings, and suddenly the gas lamps are extinguished, plunging the room into near total darkness. A few slivers of moonlight find their way through dirty windows, casting long shadows across the floor. In the darkness, the sounds become more pronounced. Someone is sobbing quietly. Another man calls out in his sleep. The snoring builds to a chorus, punctuated by coughs that sound like they're tearing lungs apart. You lie in the darkness, feeling the occasional tickle of tiny legs across your skin, too tired to even brush them away. Despite everything, the noise, the insects, the hard mattress, exhaustion wins. Your eyes grow heavy. As you drift towards sleep, you find yourself grateful. Yes, the conditions are appalling. Yes, you're sharing space with thieves and who knows what else. But you're inside, out of the rain and cold that kills so many on London's streets each winter. For 4 pennies, you've bought another day of life. Unlike you in your comfortable bed right now, surrounded by clean sheets and safe walls, sleep for the Victorian poor wasn't rest. It was just survival until dawn. Tomorrow will bring new challenges, being forced out at morning bell, finding work, scraping together enough pennies for another night's lodging. The Doss house is a treadmill, not a home. But for tonight at least, you have a roof. And as the cabin around you fades into dreams, one thought follows you into sleep. There but for fortune go you and I. Despite your exhaustion, sleep doesn't come easily. The thin partition walls of your cabin make every sound painfully clear. A symphony of misery surrounds you. Deep coughs that sound like lungs tearing, snores that rise and fall like sawmills, and whispered conversations you wish you couldn't hear. "That's the third one this week," a voice whispers from somewhere to your right. "Knife or sickness?" asks another. Sickness. Cholera, they're saying. Found him in an alley off Commercial Street. Better than what happened to that woman in Hanbury Street, I suppose. Shh, don't talk about that. Bad luck. They're talking about one of Jack the Ripper's victims, though nobody knows that name yet. In 1888, Whitechapel, he's just the killer, or Leather Apron. Only a week ago, the body of Annie Chapman was found horribly mutilated in a backyard on Hanbury Street. She was a Doss house regular. Sleep eventually takes you, but it feels like only minutes before you're jolted awake by cursing and the sound of a scuffle. Someone's been caught trying to steal from another sleeper. The fight is over almost before it begins. A few dull thuds, a cry of pain, then sullen silence. Welcome to night in a Victorian Doss house. Not exactly the sweet dreams you're enjoying in your comfortable bed right now. Morning comes brutally early. At 5:30 a.m, a bell clangs through the building, loud enough to wake the dead. The message is clear. Get up, get out. The deputy, what they call the Doss house manager, wants the cabins emptied so they can be cleaned before the next night's lodgers. Cleaning is a generous term for what actually happens. A broom might sweep across the floor, and if you're in one of the better places, the sheets might be changed weekly, maybe. The bedbugs, though, they're permanent residents. You swing your legs over the edge of the bed, grateful to find your boots exactly where you left them under the thin pillow. The man in the cabin to your left wasn't so lucky. You can hear him cursing, turning his tiny space upside down, looking for his missing footwear. Told you to sleep with one eye open, Barney says, appearing at your doorway. In the grey morning light filtering through dirty windows, he looks even more haggard than yesterday. Breakfast? The word sounds hopeful, but the reality isn't. Breakfast in a Doss house isn't included in your fourpence. If you want to eat, you either bring your own food or you buy it from whoever's selling. And since you spent your last coins on the bed, your stomach will have to wait. The smoking room, which last night hosted card games and conversation, has transformed overnight. Where men sat smoking and talking just hours ago, now they're lined up at a large sink in the corner, washing their faces in water that grows greyer with each user. The lucky ones got there early, when the water was relatively clean. New face. A cheerful voice cuts through the gloom. A short, round man with a face like a squashed tomato approaches. Henry's the name. Sell a bit of this and that. Don't trust him, Barney whispers. Henry's prices go up the more desperate you look. Henry ignores Barney, sizing you up. Got a day's work lined up? You shake your head. Finding work is today's mission. Doc's taking on day labourers, Henry offers. Or there's a house being demolished on Brick Lane. They'll need strong backs. This isn't charity. It's business. Henry's the Doss house equivalent of a hotel concierge, except his tips come with strings attached. He'll expect a cut of whatever you earn. I'll find my own, you tell him, which earns you a scowl. Suit yourself. Just remember, lot of men looking for work today, early bird and all that. He's not wrong. The streets of Whitechapel will soon be filled with men just like you, competing for too few jobs that pay too little. If you don't find work today, tonight will be spent on the streets. Unlike in your cozy world where a job is something you have rather than something you desperately hunt for every single morning, Victorian workers lived day to day, hour to hour. Their bodies were simply machines that converted labour into pennies, pennies into food and shelter, until the machine broke down. The washroom is a lesson in efficiency and discomfort. Men shave with dull razors using tiny bits of soap they guard jealously. Others simply splash water on their faces and run wet fingers through their hair. No one undresses fully. Privacy doesn't exist here. And besides, most don't have a change of clothes. "Where you from originally?" asks a tall man with a Scottish accent as he scrubs his face at the sink next to you. "Liverpool," you lie, not wanting to give away too much. "Thought as much. Got that northern look about you." He offers his hand. Angus, 3rd year in this shithole of a city. Angus has the weathered look of a man who spent his life outdoors. His hands are calloused, fingers permanently bent from some repetitive labour. "Used to be a stone mason back in Edinburgh," he says, reading the question in your eyes. "Good trade, good money. Then the drink got me. Lost my tools pawning them for gin. Now I carry coal when I can get the work." Stories like Angus's are common here. The Doss House is full of men who once had trades, families, futures. Now they have cabins, if they're lucky. "What about him?" you ask, nodding toward a quiet, well-spoken man who seems out of place among the labourers. His clothes are threadbare, but were once quality. "Fitzgerald, Clark or something before the bankruptcy, doesn't talk much about it, still acts like he's better than the rest of us, but he's in the same sinking boat." The social hierarchy of the Doss House becomes clearer as you observe. At the bottom are the truly destitute, the sick, the elderly, the broken. They take whatever work they can find, often failing. Many won't make it through another winter. Above them are the casual labourers like Angus, strong enough to earn their keep most days, but trapped in a cycle of physical toil that slowly destroying their bodies. Then there are the ones with skills but bad luck or bad habits, former clerks, craftsmen fallen on hard times, men who drink away their earnings. At the top of this peculiar pyramid are the regulars, men with steady enough work to afford a bed each night without fail. They're the aristocracy of the Doss House, looking down on newcomers with suspicion. But even the regulars are just one illness, one accident, one missed day of work away from the streets. By 6:30 a.m, the Doss House practically empties as men hurry out in search of work. You follow, not wanting to miss whatever opportunities the day might hold, but Barney catches your arm at the door. "Word of advice," he says quietly. "Whatever you earn today, don't come back showing it off. Keep a penny or two visible, hide the rest. Lot of desperate men here come nightfall." It's solid advice. The Doss House may offer shelter, but it doesn't offer safety. Outside, the morning air is thick with coal smoke and fog, the infamous London pea souper that coats your lungs and stings your eyes. Streets that seemed merely threatening in last night's darkness are revealed as squalid beyond imagining in the grey dawn light. Children no older than 5 or 6 are already at work, sweeping crossings or collecting horse dung to sell. Women with hollow cheeks hawk matches or flowers from baskets. A gin shop is doing brisk business despite the early hour. You're about to head toward the docks when you spot Fitzgerald, the former clerk, walking purposefully in the opposite direction. "Wouldn't bother with the docks today," he says as you fall in beside him. "Ship that was expected got delayed. 100 men already waiting for work that won't come." "Where are you headed?" you ask. Spitalfields Market. They sometimes need men to unload wagons. Not much, but better than nothing. You follow him through a maze of narrow streets. Fitzgerald walks with the confidence of a man who knows exactly where the day's bread might be found. He doesn't talk much, but when he does, his voice carries the refined tones of education. "First time in a doss house?" he asks after a while. You nod. "Thought as much." "You still look shocked." He pauses. That fades, unfortunately. "How long have you been?" You struggle to find a polite way to ask. "Living like this?" Fitzgerald finishes for you. 3 years, 4 months, and 16 days. Not that I'm counting. His laugh is bitter. "Used to have a desk at an accounting firm, wife, children, house in Islington. Then the firm collapsed. Owner gambled it all away. By the time I found new work, the debts had piled too high. Lost everything." "Your family?" "With her parents in Kent. Better off without me, at least until I can get back on my feet." The way he says it makes you wonder how long he's been telling himself that. "And you stay at the Doss house every night?" "When I can afford it. When I can't." He gestures vaguely toward a park bench. "Summer's not so bad. Winter, though. Winter kills the unlucky." He's not exaggerating. Every winter, bodies are found frozen on London streets or in its parks. The workhouses fill, but many prefer to take their chances with the cold rather than submit to the workhouse regime. At Spitalfields Market, you both strike lucky. A produce merchant needs crates shifted, and he's willing to pay 4p for a few hours' work. It's barely enough for another night at the Doss house with nothing left for food, but it's better than nothing. As you work, you notice a woman watching from the edge of the market. She's clearly from the same social stratum as the Doss house men. Her clothes are worn but clean. Her face shows the strain of constant worry. She catches your eye and approaches hesitantly. "You staying at Wilmot's?" she asks, naming the Doss house where you spent last night. "Yes," you reply, wondering how she knew. "Thought so. You've got that look." She glances around nervously. "If you see my Tom there, tell him Bessie's looking for him. Tell him the baby's sick and I need him to come home." Before you can ask more, she's gone, swallowed by the market crowd. Another sad story in a city full of them. The work is back-breaking but mindless, giving you plenty of time to think about your situation. 1 day's labour for 1 night's shabby shelter. Nothing saved, nothing gained. How does anyone ever escape this treadmill? Some do, of course. Save enough to get proper lodgings, find steady work, climb slowly back to respectability. But for every success story, there are 100 men who spend decades in Doss houses, or worse, end up in paupers' graves. By mid-afternoon, the job is done, and 4p sits heavy in your pocket. You've earned another night indoors, but your stomach growls painfully. It's been almost 24 hours since your last proper meal. Fitzgerald seems to read your thoughts. "Come on," he says, "I know a place." The place turns out to be a dingy soup kitchen run by stern-faced women in Salvation Army uniforms. For a halfpenny, they provide a bowl of thin vegetable soup and a chunk of bread. It's barely enough to qualify as a meal, but it takes the edge off hunger. They make you pray before eating in the evening sessions, Fitzgerald explains. Lunchtime, they're too busy. The soup kitchen clientele is even more varied than the Doss house. Entire families huddle over their meagre meals. Children with thin faces and old eyes slurp soup like it's the finest delicacy. Women who might have once been genteel sit apart, shame in every rigid line of their bodies. "That's Mrs. Pembroke," Fitzgerald whispers, nodding toward one such woman. "Husband was a solicitor, died of consumption last year, left her with nothing but debts, too proud to go to her family." you're starting to realize that Victorian poverty isn't just about the people born into slums. It's a trap door that can open beneath anyone's feet. Illness, job loss, a financial crash, any of these can send a respectable family spiraling into destitution within months. Think about your own comfortable life right now, your warm bed, your full refrigerator. The Victorians had no such safety nets. One bad month could mean the difference between a home and a doss house. As afternoon turns to evening, you and Fitzgerald make your way back toward Wilmot's. The streets grow more menacing as daylight fades. Gin shops overflow with men and women seeking liquid comfort. Hollow-eyed prostitutes as young as 15 beckon from doorways. Police constables walk in pairs, hands never far from their truncheons. Best to be inside before dark if you can manage it, Fitzgerald advises, especially with money in your pocket. Back at the Doss house, the evening ritual begins again. The kitchen is as crowded and grim as the night before, but now you notice more details. Men with consumptive coughs handle food with the same hands they use to cover their mouths. A rat scurries along the wall, barely earning a glance from the regulars. The deputy moves through the room, settling disputes with threats or, occasionally, his fists. You spot Tom, the man Bessie was looking for, slumped at a table with a half-empty bottle in front of him. When you deliver her message, his face contorts. "Baby's always sick," he mutters. "Never stops crying, can't think, can't sleep. She seemed worried," you press. "Said she needed you to come home." Tom laughs, a sound without humour. "Home? You call that one room home? Barely space to turn around, 4 of us living there?" He takes another drink. "Tell her I'll come when I've had enough of this." He won't though, you can see it in his eyes. Tonight, he'll drink away his day's wages and his family will go without. It's a story repeated in thousands of households across London. In the smoking room, the evening entertainment is in full swing. A toothless old man plays a battered accordion while another sings in a surprisingly sweet tenor. Men crowd around the billiards table, betting pennies they can ill afford to lose. A missionary hands out religious tracts that will likely become rolling paper for tobacco or kindling for morning fires. "Quite the palace of varieties," Fitzgerald remarks dryly. The mood in the room shifts suddenly as 3 men enter. They move with the confidence of predators, scanning the room for weakness. "Shark crew," Barney mutters, appearing beside you, looking for easy marks. The sharks are Doss house regulars who found that stealing from their fellow lodgers is easier than honest work. They don't operate like common pickpockets. Their method is intimidation. They'll corner a man, imply violence, and suggest he contribute to their drinking fund. You watch as they zero in on a young man, barely more than a boy, who made the mistake of displaying a few coins while paying for tea. Within minutes, they've surrounded him. No overt threats are made, but the boy hands over his money, face pale. "Deputy won't do anything," Barney explains. "Long as they don't cause too much trouble, he looks the other way, probably gets a cut." The evening wears on. The accordion player is replaced by a man reciting bawdy poetry to appreciative laughs. Someone starts a card game in the corner. Small dramas play out across the room. Arguments over borrowed tobacco, tearful confessions of lost loves, tales of better times that grow more elaborate with each telling. Despite everything, there's a strange sense of community here. These men have nothing, yet they share what little they possess: tobacco, matches, stories, information about where work might be found. They watch out for each other in their way, warn newcomers about dangers, point out which lodging houses have bedbugs and which are merely filthy. Beneath all the squalor and desperation beats something resilient, something almost hopeful. Not that things will magically improve, but that survival itself is a kind of victory, that getting through one more day with a roof overhead, no matter how wretched, means you haven't yet been tumbled. As 10 o'clock approaches, men begin drifting upstairs to secure their cabins for the night. You follow, clutching your brass token which you've guarded carefully all day. Tonight, you know what to expect. The hard bed, the thin walls, the cacophony of human misery that will surround you until dawn. But there's a peculiar comfort in familiarity, even when what's familiar is hardship. You pass the deputy's small office on your way upstairs and glimpse him counting the day's takings. It's a substantial pile of coins. At 4p per lodger, multiplied by hundreds of beds, the doss house is a profitable business for someone, even if that profit is built on desperation. They say the owner has a fine house in Kensington, Fitzgerald remarks, following your gaze. Never seen the place himself, of course. Wouldn't soil his boots with Whitechapel mud. The bells ring for lights out, and darkness falls once more on Wilmot's lodging house. In your cabin you lie awake, listening to the now familiar sounds, coughing, snoring, quiet conversations, occasional sobs. Tomorrow, you'll join the dawn exodus again, competing for work that barely sustains life. The day after will be the same, and the day after that. For how long? How many nights in this purgatory before something breaks? Your health, your spirit, your luck? Beside you in the next cabin, Barney begins to snore softly. Across the way, Fitzgerald turns restlessly on his creaking bed. Down the row, the young man robbed by the sharks weeps almost silently, and you realise something. In the doss house, everyone is equal. Former clerks lie beside labourers, educated men beside the illiterate. Whatever brought them here, drink, misfortune, poor choices, they all share the same fate now, equality in misery. As your eyes grow heavy, one last thought crosses your mind. Unlike you in your safe, comfortable bed, listening to this story, these men never knew when or if their circumstances might improve. Their present was bleak, their future uncertain, yet still they persisted day after punishing day. There's a strange nobility in that, a quiet heroism that history rarely recognises. The desperate courage of simply continuing to exist when existence itself has become a battle. Sleep finally comes, carrying you away from the doss house and its broken dreamers, at least until morning's bell shatters the brief peace once more. The doss house at night transforms into something else entirely. As the gas lamps dim and finally extinguish at 10 o'clock, the vast room of wooden cabins becomes a cavern of disembodied sounds, a cacophony of human misery in the dark. Sleep, when it comes, is shallow and alert, the kind that leaves you more exhausted than refreshed. The slightest noise jolts you awake, and there are so many noises. Tonight, around 2 a.m., you're startled from fitful dreams by a commotion several cabins away. A man screaming about snakes in his bed. The shakes, Barney will later tell you. Delirium tremens from alcohol withdrawal. Not an uncommon midnight drama at Wilmot's. "Get him out," someone shouts. "Some of us need to work tomorrow." "Shut your bloody mouth before I shut it for you," comes another voice. The deputy's heavy footsteps thud up the stairs, and soon there's the sound of a struggle, a body being dragged. The screaming fades as the man is hauled downstairs, probably to spend the rest of the night on the street. "Happens couple times a week," whispers Barney through the thin wall. "Poor bastards drink to forget they're here, then can't afford to keep drinking. The shake hits, and out they go." You lie awake after that, listening to the symphony of human suffering around you. From the cabin on your right comes a persistent wet cough that sounds like drowning on dry land. Tuberculosis, most likely. The white plague runs rampant in places like this, where men sleep practically on top of each other and fresh air is as rare as fresh food. The darkness in a Victorian doss house is never complete. Moonlight filters through dirty windows, casting everything in a ghostly blue-grey. In this half-light, you can make out shapes moving along the narrow walkways between cabins, men making their way to the single filthy toilet at the end of the hall, or simply pacing away their insomnia. "Can't sleep?" It's Fitzgerald's voice, low and cultured, even in a whisper. "Not really," you admit. "First few nights are the worst," he says, your body's still fighting it. Eventually, exhaustion wins and you'll sleep through anything. The coughs, the fights, even the bedbugs. You're not sure you believe him. How does anyone get used to this? "Remind me how long you've been doing this?" you ask. 3 years, 4 months, and 17 days now, he says, the same precise count as before. Started in a place worse than this, if you can believe it. Couldn't afford more than 2p a night back then. What's a twopenny doss like? Fitzgerald's laugh is hollow. Ever heard of a penny sit-up? That's where they charge a penny to sit on a bench all night, not allowed to lie down. 2p places let you lie down, but not in a bed. Just on the floor, packed in like sardines. No cabins, no privacy, not even a pretense of it. You try to imagine something worse than where you are now and find your mind rebelling at the thought. How do you stand it? The question escapes before you can stop it. There's a long silence, and you think maybe Fitzgerald has fallen asleep. But then his voice comes again, softer now. "I keep a picture of my family in my coat pocket. My wife, my 2 little girls. I look at it every night and promise myself this isn't forever, that I'll find my way back to them." A pause. "What about you? What gets you through?" You realise you don't have an answer. You're only 2 days into this life, and already it feels like it's crushing you. How do men endure years of it? Before you can respond, the sound of singing drifts up from somewhere below. A lone voice, surprisingly sweet, singing a folk song about home and hearth. Others join in, harmony rising from the misery. For a few minutes, the coughing and moaning stop as everyone listens. Then, just as suddenly, it ends. The regular sounds of the doss house reassert themselves. Snoring, shuffling, muffled conversations, an occasional sob. Sleep comes in fits and starts, interrupted constantly. Around 4 in the morning, you're woken by a new sound. A rustling, scrabbling noise from the corner of your cabin. Rats. The doss house is infested with them. They grow bold in the nighttime hours, venturing out from their hiding places to scavenge. You stamp your foot against the floor, and the scrabbling stops momentarily before resuming. These London rats fear nothing, not even humans. They've grown fat and aggressive on the city's filth. Down the row of cabins, someone starts talking in their sleep, pleading with unseen tormentors. "No, please, I've paid what I owe." The walls of your cabin suddenly feel like they're closing in. The air is thick with the combined breath of hundreds of men, heavy with the smell of unwashed bodies, illness and despair. For a moment, panic rises in your chest. You need to get out, need fresh air. But where would you go? The streets at this hour are even more dangerous than the doss house. At least here there's safety in numbers, meagre though it may be. You force yourself to breathe slowly, to push away the walls with your mind. This is just one night. You can endure one night, and then another, and another after that. Just as you're finally drifting back to sleep, a bell rings, harsh and insistent. 5:30 already. Morning has come to Wilmot's? Men groan and curse as they're dragged from whatever rest they manage to find. Bodies creak and protest, stiff from thin mattresses and hard labour. The coughing intensifies as chests that settled during sleep are disturbed again. In the grey pre-dawn light, you see your neighbours clearly for the first time since lights out. Barney's face is puffy from sleep, the lines around his mouth deeper than they seemed yesterday. Fitzgerald looks like he hasn't slept at all, dark circles beneath his eyes. All around you men transform from vulnerable sleepers back into the hardened shells they present to the world. Interestingly, the morning routine has an almost military precision to it. Men line up for the toilet, for the sink, for the single cracked mirror that serves the entire floor. There's no privacy, but there is a rough sort of order, an unspoken understanding that everyone deserves their turn, however brief. 3-minute rule at the sink, Barney explains as you wait your turn. Any longer and someone will pull you away. Fair's fair. When your turn comes, you splash cold water on your face and use a finger to scrub at your teeth. Tooth powder is a luxury few here can afford. You catch a glimpse of yourself in the mirror and barely recognize the face staring back. One day in a doss house, and already you look different, harder, more hollow. Breakfast, for those who can afford it, is tea and bread. The Doss House provides hot water for free. Their one generosity. Everything else must be purchased. Men huddle around the kitchen fire brewing tea in battered metal cups. The relay system that defines the Doss House becomes clearer this morning as your group is preparing to leave. Forced out by the deputy's impatient shouts, another wave of men arrives. Night workers just finishing their shifts. The beds you've vacated will be occupied again within hours, hardly cooling between bodies. 3 shifts a day in some of these places, Fitzgerald tells you as you both head for the street. Morning to afternoon, afternoon to night, night to morning, beds never empty. Think about that for a moment. Your nice, clean bed at home is yours alone. These Victorian beds saw 3 different bodies every 24 hours, the sheets unchanged for weeks. A human conveyor belt of exhaustion. What about the bedding, you ask, remembering the suspicious stains on your thin mattress? Fitzgerald laughs. Changed when it falls apart, not before. Some places advertise clean sheets weekly, but even that's doubtful. I bring my own bit of cloth to put over the pillow. Recommend you do the same if you stay long. Outside, the morning brings a new horror. Overnight, someone has died in the alley beside the Doss House, a huddled shape covered with a ragged tarpaulin, 2 constables standing guard. Just another casualty of London's streets. Old Jenkins, says a voice behind you. It's Henry, the Doss House concierge, who tried to sell you work yesterday. Couldn't make his 4pence last night. Tried to sleep rough. Cold got him, looks like. The casual way he says it is perhaps the most chilling thing of all. Death by poverty is so common here that it barely registers as tragic. Just the expected end of an expected trajectory. How old was he, you ask? Jenkins? 50 or so. Ancient for around here. 50. In your time, that's middle age, with decades of life still ahead. In Victorian Whitechapel, it's a surprising longevity. You and Fitzgerald part ways at the corner, each heading off in search of the day's wage. But something pulls you back toward the Doss House. A morbid curiosity about how it functions when most of its nighttime residents are gone. Slipping down a side alley, you circle around to the back of the building. A small window at ground level gives you a view into the basement kitchen. Inside, women in stained aprons are giving the tables a perfunctory wipe with dirty cloths. Not cleaning exactly, more spreading the filth around more evenly. As you watch, a cart arrives loaded with sacks of the cheapest flour and ancient vegetables, the food that will become tonight's overpriced meals for those who can afford them. The driver hands something to one of the kitchen women. Money changes hands for what looks like watered-down milk. "Every penny squeezed," says a voice that makes you jump. It's Barney, who apparently had the same idea as you. Owner takes his cut, deputy takes his, kitchen women take theirs. By the time they serve it, that cabbage has paid for itself 10 times over. You move away from the window, not wanting to be caught spying. "I thought everyone had to be out during the day." Most do. "I've got an arrangement with the deputy. Do some odd jobs around the place. He lets me stay in when my chest is bad." Barney coughs as if to emphasize his point, a wet, rattling sound. "What kind of jobs?" Barney's face closes. Nothing worth talking about, just work. But you've been in the doss house long enough now to guess. The bouncer at the door, the one who drags out troublemakers in the night, the one who enforces the deputy's rules when persuasion fails. Barney's size suddenly makes more sense. "You seen enough?" he asks. "Best get looking for work. City doesn't feed idle hands." You take his advice, heading toward the docks where ships might be unloading, but Barney's words stick with you. The doss house isn't just a place to sleep, it's an ecosystem, a microeconomy built on desperation, everyone trying to extract what little value remains from those who have almost nothing left to give. The day passes in a blur of rejections. No work at the docks. The demolition site Fitzgerald mentioned has already hired all the men they need. You try warehouses, markets, anywhere that might need an extra pair of hands for a few hours. By mid-afternoon, you're losing hope. Without 4 pence for tonight's bed, you'll be like old Jenkins, sleeping rough and at the mercy of London's cold nights and colder citizens. Then luck strikes. A brewer's cart has lost a wheel on Commercial Street, bottles smashed everywhere. The driver, a red-faced man with enormous arms, is beside himself. You 6pence if you help clean this mess and get the rest of the load to the pub on Brick Lane. 6pence, enough for the doss house with pennies left for food. You don't hesitate, already gathering broken glass with your bare hands, ignoring the cuts. The work takes 2 hours and leaves you stinking of beer, but the 6pence is real and solid in your palm afterward. Relief floods you. Another night inside, another night not spent shivering in a doorway or under a bridge. And that's when it hits you how quickly your standards have fallen. 2 days ago, the thought of sleeping in a bug-infested cabin would have horrified you. Now it feels like a victory. That's what poverty does. It doesn't just take away comfort, it takes away expectations. It resets what you consider tolerable until you're grateful for conditions that would have once seemed like torture. As evening approaches, you make your way back to Wilmot's, 6pence secure in an inner pocket where it can't be easily stolen. The streets are filling with night people, prostitutes, thieves, drunks staggering from gin shops. A missionary stands on a corner handing out religious tracts to uninterested passers-by. "The wages of sin is death," he shouts at no one in particular. "Repent and be saved." A woman in a stained dress laughs bitterly as she passes him. "The wages of anything is death in this place, love. Sin just makes the wait more interesting." At the doss house door, you notice something you missed before. A small sign with rates posted. "Wilmot's lodging house registered and inspected. Single cabin. 4D double cabin. Married couples. 7 children under 12. Tude. No credit. No exceptions." Below this official notice, someone has scratched graffiti into the wood. "Abandon hope, all ye who enter." The deputy barely looks up as you hand over your 4pence, just passes you the brass token for your cabin. The system is impersonal, mechanical. You're not a person to him, just a temporary owner of bed space. The smoking room is more crowded than the previous night. Rain has started outside, driving in men who might otherwise have stayed out later. The air is thick with tobacco smoke and the smell of damp wool. Someone has produced a battered fiddle and is playing a jig while others clap along. You spot Fitzgerald in a corner, deep in conversation with a man you haven't seen before. When he notices you, he waves you over. Good news, he says, his face showing more animation than you've seen before. Johnson here says the railway's taking on men tomorrow, track laying out toward Paddington, week's work at least if you're strong enough. Hope flares in your chest. A week's work would mean a week of guaranteed beds, food, maybe even enough saved to look for something better than Wilmot's. You thank Johnson for the information, careful not to seem too eager. Competition for such jobs will be fierce. Don't thank me yet, Johnson says grimly. Foreman's a devil, works men till they drop. Lost 2 fingers myself on the last stretch. He holds up a maimed hand, but it's steady money if you can stand it. Even with this warning, the prospect of steady work feels like the first good news in days. You, Fitzgerald, and Johnson make plans to leave together at dawn, giving yourselves time to be first in line when the foreman arrives. As you talk, you notice Barney enter the smoking room. He looks exhausted, more so than when you saw him this morning. He catches your eye but looks away quickly, heading for the kitchen instead. What's his story anyway? You ask Fitzgerald, nodding toward Barney's retreating back. Fitzgerald's expression turns somber. Barney? Been here longer than most. Used to be a blacksmith before his lungs went bad from the forge. Now he does the deputy's dirty work. Not proud of it, but we all do what we must. And you? What did you do today? You're genuinely curious how a former clerk survives in this environment. Wrote letters for people who can't write. Penny a page. Not much, but it's something. He shrugs. Education's the one thing they can't take from you, even in here. The evening winds on. Men come and go. Stories are exchanged. Who's hiring, who's not, which charities are giving out food, which policemen can be bribed, and which are zealous enforcers of vagrancy laws. Information is currency in the world of the destitute, sometimes more valuable than money itself. You notice the young man who was robbed by the sharks last night. He sits alone, nursing a mug of tea, eyes darting nervously around the room. When he sees you looking, he flinches slightly. First week's the hardest, you find yourself saying as you sit beside him, surprising yourself with this show of camaraderie. Gets easier, or so I'm told. He looks at you suspiciously, then relaxes a fraction. William, he offers, from Bristol originally. What brought you to London? Same thing that brings everyone. Thought there'd be work, opportunity. He laughs bitterly. Found this instead. William's story is depressingly familiar. Rural poverty driving young men to the city, only to find urban poverty waiting with open arms. He'd been a farm labourer until the farm was sold. Came to London with enough savings for 2 weeks. It's been 3 months, and he's barely surviving. Got work on the docks sometimes, he says. When I'm lucky, not often enough. You tell him about the railway job, and his eyes light up. Another potential recruit for tomorrow's dawn expedition. As 10 o'clock approaches, the mood in the smoking room shifts. Men begin to gather their few possessions, preparing for the nightly migration upstairs. The fiddle player packs away his instrument. Card games come to an end, with winners pocketing their meagre winnings, and losers cursing their luck. Tonight, you approach your cabin with less dread than before. You know what to expect now. The hard bed, the thin walls, the noises and smells. Familiar discomforts are somehow less distressing than new ones. You even come prepared, a scrap of relatively clean cloth to lay over the pillow, as Fitzgerald suggested. A luxury of sorts. The bell rings for lights out. Darkness falls. Around you, 200 men settle in for another night of fitful sleep, each in their narrow wooden cell. But tonight, something is different. There's a sense of not hope exactly, but possibility. Tomorrow might bring work. Work brings money. Money brings choices, however limited. As you drift towards sleep, you find yourself thinking about the Victorian poor in a way you hadn't before. Their lives were an endless series of small battles for work, for food, for shelter, for dignity. Most lost those battles eventually, but they fought them anyway, day after punishing day. There's a certain terrible courage in that, a stubborn refusal to surrender, even when surrender seems inevitable. You pull your thin blanket tighter, grateful for the roof above. However wretched, unlike you in your safe, comfortable bed right now, these Victorian dossers never knew if tomorrow would be better or worse. They just knew it would come, ready or not. Sleep takes you finally, deep and dreamless from exhaustion. Tomorrow waits with its uncertain promises. Tonight, at least, you're sheltered from the worst the city can inflict. The rain continues to fall on Wilmot's lodging house, and 200 men breathe as one beneath its leaking roof, waiting for whatever morning will bring. The morning bell at Wilmot's comes too soon, as always, 5:30 sharp, and there's no possibility of just 5 more minutes like you might enjoy in your comfortable bed now. Here the deputy enforces wake up with brutal efficiency, ringing the bell, then walking the rows, banging on partitions and occasionally dousing particularly stubborn sleepers with cold water. Railway day, Fitzgerald murmurs from the next cabin. Best be quick about it. You're already learning the rhythms of doss house life, the mad scramble for the washroom, the strategic positioning to avoid the dirtiest water, the careful check of your few possessions to ensure nothing vanished in the night. Your boots, thankfully, are still where you tucked them under the thin mattress. The sixpence you earned yesterday is still secure in its hiding place. Small victories in a world where defeat is the baseline. William, the young man from Bristol, joins you and Fitzgerald as promised. He looks even younger in the harsh morning light, barely more than a boy, but his eyes are old, weathered by months of London's brutal education. Johnson's meeting us at the corner, Fitzgerald says as you all head downstairs. Says he knows the foreman. The kitchen is a frenzy of activity. Men gulping down tea, shoving bread into pockets for later, negotiating last-minute loans of tobacco or pennies. The air is thick with smoke, steam, and desperation. Outside, the world is still more grey than light, dawn just beginning to break over London's jumbled rooftops. The rain has stopped, but puddles fill the uneven streets, reflecting the pale sky like shattered mirrors. The air smells of wet coal dust and something rotten from the nearby river. Johnson is waiting as promised, smoking a hand-rolled cigarette that seems to be more paper than tobacco. Right then, he says by way of greeting, Paddington's a fair walk, best get started if we want to be first in line. And so your small band sets off through London's waking streets, 4 men, each carrying their worldly possessions, which combined wouldn't fill a single modern suitcase. 4 men among thousands just like you, all hunting the same scarce work. The city transforms with each mile walked. Whitechapel's squalor gives way to slightly more respectable working-class neighbourhoods, which in turn yield to the middle-class districts. Buildings grow taller, the streets cleaner, the faces you pass less haunted. It's like travelling between different worlds within the same city. In the wealthier areas, servants scrub front steps and polish brass knockers. Delivery boys rush fresh bread from bakeries. Ladies' maids hurry on early errands, their black dresses and white caps marking them as clearly as uniforms. Always feel like I'm trespassing here, William confesses as you pass through Marylebone, where the houses stand tall and proud, their curtained windows like disapproving eyes watching your ragged procession. Used to live in a place like this, Fitzgerald says quietly, gesturing to a row of respectable townhouses. Not quite so grand, but decent. Front parlour, 3 bedrooms, maid came in twice a week. You try to reconcile the broken man beside you with the comfortable middle-class existence he describes, how thin the line between respectability and ruin. The walk to Paddington takes nearly 2 hours at a brisk pace. By the time you arrive, your empty stomach is protesting and your feet have developed fresh blisters inside your poorly fitting boots. But you've made it, and ahead you can see the railway works sprawling across what was once fields on the city's edge. It's an apocalyptic landscape, mountains of earth torn open, skeletons of half-finished bridges, the ground churned to mud by thousands of boots, and everywhere men working, hundreds of them swarming like ants over the vast construction site. There, Johnson points toward a makeshift office, really just a shed with a table out front where a red-faced man is consulting a ledger while a line of hopeful workers forms before him. You join the line, which grows longer by the minute as more men arrive from every direction. The mood is tense. Every man here knows there are more hands than jobs. Some will walk away with nothing. Taylor's the name, the foreman barks when you finally reach the front. Railway experience? You shake your head. Strong back? You nod. 6pence a day, sunrise to sunset. Take it or leave it. 6pence is less than you'd hoped, but more than nothing. You take it. That lot over there. Taylor jerks his thumb toward a group of men being issued shovels. Earth moving. Keep your mouth shut and your back bent if you want tomorrow's 6pence too. Fitzgerald and William are also hired, assigned to the same crew. Johnson, with his railway experience, gets placed with the track layers at 8pence a day, a veritable fortune by comparison. Your new workplace is a vast cutting, a canyon being dug through a low hill to create a level path for the train tracks. The walls rise 20 feet on either side, mud and stone waiting to be shifted by nothing more sophisticated than muscle and determination. The foreman for your section is a wiry man named Burke with arms like twisted oak branches. He sizes up the new arrivals with cold efficiency. 2 feet depth across this section by day's end, he announces, marking out territories with his boot. Fail and don't bother coming back tomorrow. And so begins your education in Victorian hard labour. The work is punishing in a way you couldn't have imagined. Hour after hour of lifting sodden earth, the shovel handle rubbing blisters that burst and bleed, then form new blisters atop the raw flesh. The mud clings to the shovel, doubling its weight. Your back screams with each lift. Your shoulders burn. Your hands, unaccustomed to such labour, crack and bleed. Pace yourself, advises an old-timer working nearby. Marathon, not a sprint. Men who start too fast are carried out by noon. He's right. Already, 2 workers have collapsed, one from exhaustion, one when a shoveled stone struck his temple. Neither received any attention beyond being dragged to the side of the cutting to recover or not, as fate decided. The Victorian worksite has no safety regulations, no hard hats, no steel-toed boots. Men work in whatever clothes they own, many in tattered shoes that provide no protection against falling tools or shifted stones. Injuries are constant, crushed fingers, twisted ankles, gashed foreheads. Lost 3 men last week, the old-timer tells you during a brief water break. Tunnel collapse over at the west section. Buried alive they were. Company paid the widows £1 each and hired replacements the same day. £1 for a life, less than the cost of wooden coffin that would house it. Midday brings a 30-minute rest. No shelter, no facilities, just permission to stop digging and consume whatever food you've brought. For most, including you, that's nothing. Your 6pence from yesterday went to the doss house, and today's railway pay won't come until evening. William looks ready to collapse, his young face grey with exhaustion. Fitzgerald, surprisingly, seems to be holding up better. "Wasn't always a clerk," he explains when you comment on this. "Farm boy originally. Body remembers the work, even if the mind wants to forget." Bert watches from the edge of the cutting, eyes constantly moving, noting who rests too long, who works too slowly. Men like him are the backbone of Victorian industry, the human whips who drive other men to exhaustion in service of progress and profit. The afternoon is worse than the morning. Every muscle screams. The sun beats down, turning the cutting into an oven. Men stripped to the waist, their bodies maps of hard living. Scars, poorly healed breaks, skin weathered to leather by years outdoors. You notice the class divisions even here, at society's bottom edge. The Irish labourers work together, speaking their own language, watching each other's backs. The rural English stick together, viewing London men with suspicion. The truly desperate alcoholics, the elderly, the infirm, are given the worst sections, the heaviest loads, as if their suffering matters less. Above you, on the cutting's edge, better-dressed figures occasionally appear. Engineers with their plans and instruments, company men in top hats discussing progress and profits while studiously avoiding the sight of the broken men whose labour makes those profits possible. Once, a group of ladies and gentlemen stops to observe the work. A railway excursion, treating the construction site like an exhibition. They point and murmur, their faces showing fascination or revulsion, or both. "Like we're animals in a zoo," William mutters, pausing to wipe sweat from his eyes. "Back to it," Burke shouts, noticing the momentary rest. "Daylight's wasting. By late afternoon, your section has nearly reached the required depth." Men work with renewed energy, knowing that failure means no work tomorrow. Even William finds hidden reserves, his shovel rising and falling with desperate rhythm. At last, Burke gives the grudging nod that means acceptable progress. Men slump in relief, gathering tools for return to the central shed. The pay line forms quickly, 100 filthy, exhausted men shuffling forward to receive the coins that represent a day balanced on the knife edge between survival and disaster. When your turn comes, Taylor counts 6 pennies into your palm without looking up. One day's brutal labour converted to one night's shelter and perhaps a meagre meal. The transaction is complete in seconds, your humanity entirely irrelevant to the exchange. Outside the pay shed, Fitzgerald, William, and a dozen others hover, uncertainty on their faces. "Same again tomorrow?" someone asks. "If you're lucky," Taylor calls from inside. 6 a.m. sharp, late, and your spot goes to someone else. The knowledge that tomorrow holds more of the same, the back-breaking work, the constant fear of injury, the sixpence that barely sustains life, should be crushing. But oddly, there's relief too. Steady work, even like this, is better than the desperate daily scramble you've known so far. "Drink?" Johnson suggests, having received his superior 8p. Pub on the way back does a decent stew with your beer. The prospect of actual hot food is too tempting to resist. Your small group joins the stream of labourers heading back towards central London, bodies bent with fatigue but spirits cautiously lifted by the weight of coins in pockets. The pub Johnson leads you to is clearly accustomed to railway workers. The landlord doesn't blink at your filthy clothes and mud-caked boots. The main room is already half full of men just like you, gratefully washing away the day's miseries with warm beer. You spend a precious 2p on a bowl of stew and half-pint of dark ale. The stew is mostly potato and gristle, with a few floating carrots, but it's hot and fills the aching void in your belly. The beer is warm and weak, but takes the edge off muscles that tremble from overuse. "Not bad, eh?" Johnson says, already on his second pint. His experience and higher wage have earned him a position of temporary authority in your small group. Told you the railway was steady money. If we survive it, Fitzgerald remarks dryly. His soft clerk's hands are a mess of blisters and torn flesh, but he's managed the work better than you expected. William says nothing, focused entirely on his food. The boy looks half-starved, which he probably is. London has been consuming him bite by bite for months. The conversation around you in the pub paints a vivid picture of working-class Victorian life. Men discuss which foremen can be trusted to pay fare, which are likely to cheat on measurements. They exchange information about workhouses with bearable conditions, charities that give food without sermons, police constables who turn a blind eye to sleeping in parks. More than anything, they talk about the absent, wives in distant villages sending desperate letters, children working in factories, parents in paupers' graves. The Victorian working man's heart is perpetually divided, torn between where he must be to earn and where he longs to be to live. As twilight deepens outside, your thoughts turn to Wilmot's. 4p for the night's bed leaves you with 2p, enough for breakfast tomorrow if you're careful. We should head back, you suggest. Long walk still. The others nod, reluctantly abandoning the pub's warmth for London's cooling streets. Night is falling as you walk, the city transforming once again. Lamplighters move from post to post, bringing artificial day to better neighbourhoods. In poorer streets, darkness gathers unchallenged in doorways and alleys. The journey back feels twice as long as the morning's walk, each step a negotiation with exhausted muscles. You pass through the invisible boundaries between London's worlds again, from middle-class comfort back toward East End squalor. Near Tottenham Court Road, you witness a scene that crystallises Victorian London's brutal divisions. A family is being evicted, their meagre possessions thrown onto the street, a wailing woman clutching an infant, the husband arguing futilely with the landlord and police constable overseeing the removal. 1 week late, the landlord keeps repeating. Rules are rules. Passers-by barely glance at the spectacle. It's too common to merit attention, this sudden plunge from precarious housing to none at all. By morning, this family will have joined the ranks of London's truly destitute, their possessions sold or stolen, their options narrowed to workhouse street or river. Nothing we can do, Fitzgerald murmurs, seeing you pause. That's tomorrow's fate watching today's victims. It's after 9 when you finally reach Wilmot's. The Doss House is busier than previous nights. Men attracted by rumours of railway work have flocked to the area. You're grateful to have secured beds already. The kitchen's fetid air feels almost welcoming after the miles walked. You find a space at one of the rough tables, savour the simple pleasure of sitting on something that isn't mud. Barney appears, looking genuinely pleased to see you. Heard about the railway, he says. Good on you. Steady work's gold around here. There's something different about Barney tonight, a lightness that wasn't there before. Later, you learn he's received a letter from his daughter in Manchester. She's offering him a place to stay, a chance to escape the Doss House. He'll be leaving at month's end once he's saved the train fare. 8 years in places like this, he tells you. Started as a step up from the street, turned into a prison. Man adapts to anything, given time. That's the danger. The smoking room is crowded, every bench and corner claimed. The shark crew is working the room, identifying targets for later intimidation. You make sure to keep your remaining 2p well hidden. Exhaustion hits you like a physical blow as you climb the stairs to your cabin. Your body has reached the limits of endurance, muscles trembling, joints aching, hands raw and swollen. Yet when you finally lie down on the thin mattress, sleep proves elusive. The day replays in your mind, the cuttings, mud walls, Burke's watchful eyes, the ladies and gentlemen observing from above, the family being evicted, their possessions scattered on the cobblestones. Through the partition you hear Fitzgerald whispering, a prayer perhaps, or words addressed to the family picture he mentioned keeping. On your other side, William is already asleep, his breathing heavy and regular. Unlike your comfortable bed now, with its soft mattress and clean sheets, these Victorian beds offered no real rest, just a few hours unconsciousness before the body was required to labour again. The nearest modern equivalent might be prison cells, but even those provide more comfort and privacy than a doss house cabin. Your mind drifts to the railway cutting. Tomorrow will bring more of the same. The burning muscles, the watchful foreman, the endless shovelfuls of earth. The day after, the same again and again and again. How long could a body endure such treatment? How many years before the constant strain broke something vital? You've seen the older labourers, their bodies twisted by decades of hard use, moving like men 4 times their age. That's the future that awaits the luckier doss house residents. Not death in an alley like old Jenkins, but a slow crumbling piece by piece until nothing remains but a shell that can no longer labour enough to pay for its own upkeep. The lights go out at 10 o'clock, as always. The familiar symphony of coughs, snores and whispered conversations rises around you. Someone down the row is sobbing quietly. Someone else is praying. From somewhere outside comes the faint sound of singing. A street evangelist, perhaps, or a drunk finding solace in music. The melody drifts through the doss house's thin walls, a momentary beauty in a place that knows little of it. Tomorrow will come too soon with its bells and demands, but for now there's this, the quiet dark, the illusion of privacy, the pretense of rest, small mercies in an unmerciful world. Sleep finally takes you, carrying you away from the Victorian doss house and its regiment of broken dreamers. As consciousness fades, one thought lingers. For these men, survival itself was victory. Each day endured, a battle won against forces determined to grind them into nothing. Unlike you, drifting off in warm, safe comfort, they never knew if tomorrow would reward their stubborn persistence or finally break them. They just kept going, one painful step after another, because the alternative was unthinkable. And somehow, in that relentless determination to continue despite everything, there was a kind of dignity that transcended their circumstances, a silent rebellion against a world that valued them only for what could be extracted from their bodies, then discarded when nothing remained. Sunday arrives as a brief reprieve from labour. The railway works are closed, not from any Victorian concern for workers' well-being, but because operating on the Sabbath would offend respectable religious sensibilities. For you and your newfound companions, it's a welcome respite for bodies pushed to their limits. You wake later than usual, the doss house strangely quiet without the usual dawn commotion. Many beds lie empty, their occupants either at church, unlikely, spending their Saturday wages in pubs until they closed, possible, or simply sleeping rough to save 4pence, probable. Fancy a walk, Fitzgerald suggests when you finally descend to the kitchen. Sunday's the day to see what we're living amongst. East End puts on a different face. With nothing better to do and fourpence already secured for tonight's bed, you agree. William joins you, his young face showing the first hints of recovery after a night's proper sleep. Johnson is nowhere to be found, last seen heading to a pub after declaring his intention to drink Saturday and sleep Sunday like a civilized man. Outside, Whitechapel Road bustles with an energy that belies its squalid reputation. Sunday brings out people in their best clothes, which for most means simply their cleanest rags, carefully mended. Women have pinned bright scraps of ribbon to drab dresses. Men have slicked their hair with water, attempted to brush decades of grime from jackets. This way, Fitzgerald leads you down a side street. Might as well see the worst first. The worst turns out to be Dorset Street, a narrow lane running between Crispin Street and Commercial Street that even in daytime feels shrouded in permanent midnight. The buildings lean toward each other across the street, blocking sunlight, creating a tunnel of shadow and decay. They call it the worst street in London, Fitzgerald explains. More violence, more misery per inch than anywhere else in the city. Dorset Street is a museum of Victorian squalor. Every doorway seems to contain either a gin shop, a brothel poorly disguised as a lodging house for single women, or a doss house even worse than Wilmot's. Men and women in various states of intoxication lounge in doorways, despite the early hour. Children with hollow eyes and bare feet play in gutters thick with substances you'd rather not identify. Mary Kelly died here, William says suddenly. The last one, the Ripper's last. You've heard of Jack the Ripper, of course, the shadow hanging over Whitechapel. 5 women that they know of murdered and mutilated in the autumn of 1888. Though it's now 1889, the killer was never caught and fear still lingers in these narrow streets. Lived in a doss house, most of his victims. Fitzgerald nods. That's what I meant about the worst seeing the worst. It's always the vulnerable who suffer most. You pass a doss house with a faded sign. Cooney's Lodging House, clean beds 4D nightly. Through its open door, you glimpse a scene of indescribable filth. Men slumped on benches, the floor sticky with spilled beer and worse. A cloud of pipe smoke so thick it looks solid. Makes Wilmot's look like Buckingham Palace, William observes. There's a hierarchy even in hell, Fitzgerald says. Wilmot's is middling, not the best, far from the worst. The truly worst places, he shakes his head. Twopenny rope houses, no beds at all, just a rope strung across the room that you lean over all night, cut loose at 5 in the morning, ready or not. You try to imagine sleeping suspended over a rope and fail, yet for some, even that brutal accommodation is preferable to the streets. Turning a corner, you enter Flower and Dean Street, another infamous address in Whitechapel's catalogue of misery. Here the buildings are taller, more imposing. Once respectable homes now subdivided into dozens of tiny rooms, each housing entire families. Elizabeth Stride lived here, Fitzgerald points to a particularly grim building, and Catherine Eddowes just 2 doors down, both killed the same night. Same night, you ask, surprised? September 30th, 1888. The double event, they called it in the papers. Stride's body found in Dutfield's yard off Burner Street at 1 in the morning. Eddowes in Mitre Square less than an hour later. The matter-of-fact way he describes these horrors chills you. But that's Whitechapel. Death and violence so commonplace they barely merit special attention. As if reading your thoughts, William says, you get used to it. The blood, the screams at night. After a while, you stop hearing it. That's when you know the place has claimed you, Fitzgerald adds quietly, when the unthinkable becomes just background noise. You continue walking, emerging eventually onto Commercial Street, one of the main thoroughfares cutting through the East End. Here the atmosphere changes. More shops, more respectable facades, though the poverty remains just below the surface. Spitalfields Market, Fitzgerald announces as you approach a bustling square filled with stalls and shouting vendors, heart of the East End for better or worse. Unlike the quiet streets you've just navigated, the market thrums with life and commerce. Costermongers, street sellers hawk everything from bruised apples to second-hand boots. Women haggle fiercely over limp vegetables and suspicious meat. Children weave through the crowd, some legitimately running errands, others picking pockets with practiced skill. The smells are overwhelming. Rotting produce, raw fish, unwashed bodies, horse manure, and occasionally a whiff of something actually appetizing from a hot food stall. Hungry? Fitzgerald asks with a wry smile. Your tuppence could buy something here. Perhaps an eel pie for a stall where a red-faced man is shouting hot eels, lovely hot eels, or a baked potato from a vendor whose hands are black with coal dust and grease. You opt for the potato, handed over wrapped in a scrap of newspaper. It burns your fingers but fills your empty stomach with solid warmth. Such simple pleasures take on enormous significance when you live at survival's edge. Markets different in different seasons, William explains as you eat. Summer's worst. Meat goes off fast, smells like death by afternoon. Winter's hard too, fingers freeze to the stalls. Spring's best, when the country produce starts coming in. You realise William's knowledge comes from experience. He's probably spent many days here, perhaps buying, perhaps just scavenging what's left at day's end when vendors dump unsold goods. As you wander the market, you notice the diversity of East London's population. Irish labourers argue loudly over the price of tobacco. Jewish tailors examine fabric with expert eyes. A group of Lascars, South Asian sailors, huddle together speaking a language you don't recognise. Chinese men from Limehouse pass through quickly, heads down, avoiding attention. East End's where London puts everyone it doesn't want to look at, Fitzgerald observes. The immigrants, the poor, the broken, out of sight, out of mind. Yet there's vibrancy here too, a stubborn life force that refuses to be extinguished by poverty. Children play elaborate games with improvised toys. A street musician coaxes a surprisingly beautiful melody from a battered violin. Women gossip and laugh while washing clothes in public troughs. You pass a building that stands out for its relative cleanliness and orderly appearance. A sign proclaims it Salvation Army Shelter and Soup Kitchen. Better than most DOS houses, Fitzgerald acknowledges. Clean sheets, decent food, but you'll sit through sermons for the privilege. And they separate men from women. No good if you've got a family. Why doesn't everyone go there then, you ask? Pride, Williams says simply. Some won't take charity, others don't want religion forced down their throats, and they fill up fast, turn away more than they take in most nights. Beyond the shelter stands a large, imposing workhouse, the Victorian solution to poverty that most fear more than starvation itself. Its high walls and barred windows give it the appearance of a prison, which in many ways it is. Bethnal Green Workhouse, Fitzgerald says, his voice dropping. Last resort, go in there and you might never come out. You've heard enough about workhouses to understand the fear they inspire. Families separated, meagre rations, endless labour-breaking stones, or picking oakum unravelling old rope until your fingers bleed. The stigma that follows you forever after, a mark of failure in a society that views poverty as moral weakness. Man I knew went in last winter, William says. Strong as an ox before. Came out 3 months later. Couldn't recognise him. Skin and bones, something gone from his eyes. Died a week after. You move on quickly, no one wanting to linger in the workhouse's shadow. The streets become gradually more respectable as you head west. The buildings less crowded, the faces less haunted. Christ Church. Fitzgerald points to an imposing white stone church with a distinctive spire. Designed by Hawksmoor, supposed to bring light to the heathen East End, the church stands like a fortress of respectability amid squalor, its wealthy congregation arriving in carriages from safer neighbourhoods, rarely venturing beyond the church steps into the streets where their Christian charity is most needed. As if on cue, a group of well-dressed churchgoers emerges from the service. Ladies in fine dresses and elaborate hats, gentlemen in frock coats and top hats. They pause at the top of the steps, surveying the scene below with expressions ranging from pity to disgust. One lady, younger than the rest, breaks away and approaches a thin child selling matches nearby. She presses a coin into the child's hand, earning disapproving glances from her companions. A small act of genuine charity amid performance. You circle back toward Brick Lane, where the character of the East End changes once again. Here, the Jewish community has established a foothold. Shops with Hebrew signs, kosher butchers, synagogues converted from old chapels. Different kind of poverty here, Fitzgerald observes. They look after their own. You won't find Jewish families in the workhouse. Community supports them, finds them work. The contrast is striking. The same economic hardship, but faced collectively rather than individually. Store owners extend credit to neighbours. Rabbis organise relief for the neediest. Children are fed by the community when parents can't provide. Makes you wonder, Williams says thoughtfully. If English poor did the same, maybe fewer would end up in places like Wilmot's. But Victorian England's Protestant ethos emphasises individual salvation, individual responsibility. Collective action is viewed with suspicion. Charity carefully rationed lest it encourage dependency. The result walks these streets, thousands left to whatever fate their individual efforts can secure. As afternoon wears on, you pass through the Nickel, the old Nickel Street Rookery, possibly London's most notorious slum. Even Fitzgerald seems uneasy here, walking faster, eyes constantly moving. "Don't stop, don't make eye contact," he murmurs. "Not safe even in daylight." The buildings here seem to be actively collapsing, walls bulging outward, roofs sagging, windows stuffed with rags instead of glass. Sewage runs openly in the street. The stench is overwhelming. A group of men watches your passage with predatory eyes. A woman calls something from a window that might be an invitation or a warning. Children that would be pitiful if they weren't so clearly dangerous play some violent game in a doorway. 7,000 people live in these few streets, Fitzgerald says once you've passed through, packed so tight they sleep in shifts, one family per room, sometimes 15 to 20 people. Average lifespan here is 16 years. 16 years, the number staggers you. Many of the children you just saw won't survive to adulthood. Disease, violence, malnutrition, accident, death finds too many paths through these narrow streets. You complete your circuit, returning to Whitechapel Road as afternoon fades toward evening. The Sunday crowd has changed character. Fewer families, more solitary men, more women whose profession is indicated by their posture and gaze rather than explicit solicitation. "Learned anything?" Fitzgerald asks as you walk. You're not sure how to answer. You've seen too much and yet barely scratched the surface of East London's complex ecosystem of survival and suffering. "I've learned there are circles within circles," you finally say. "Levels of hell I didn't know existed." Fitzgerald nods approvingly. That's more than most ever understand. The East End isn't one place. It's 1,000 little kingdoms, each with its own rules, its own dangers, its own small mercies. William, who's been quiet for much of the walk, suddenly asks, "Do you think anyone gets out? Really out, I mean. Not just to a better room or a steadier job, but actually out." The question hangs between you. You've all seen enough to know the odds. The Victorian poor weren't just financially disadvantaged, they were trapped by geography, education, accent, manners, connections, health, and 1,000 other invisible barriers. Some do, Fitzgerald says finally. Not many, but some. You wonder which category your companions fall into. Is William young enough, strong enough to eventually escape? Is Fitzgerald too broken by his fall from respectability? What about yourself? Are you already being shaped into a permanent denizen of this shadow world? Back at Wilmot's, the evening routine unfolds as usual. Men cooking meagre meals in the kitchen, others smoking and talking in the common room, the gradual shift from daylight to gas lamp to darkness as 10 o'clock approaches. But you see it differently now. Each face contains a story like those you've glimpsed today. The old man carefully mending his only shirt was perhaps once a craftsman with his own shop. The hollow-cheeked woman delivering clean laundry might sleep in a room with 7 others in the Nicole. The young boy collecting empty bottles could be dead before reaching 20. Whitechapel isn't just a place, it's a condition, a constantly shifting ecosystem of desperation and endurance. The Doss House is merely one manifestation of its brutal economy, where everything, shelter, food, bodies, dignity, has a price, usually too high for those who need it most. As you settle into your cabin for another night, the familiar sounds of the Doss House wash over you. Coughing, snoring, whispered conversations, muffled sobs. But now you hear them as a tiny fragment of a much larger chorus echoing through East London's labyrinthine streets. Tomorrow means returning to the railway cutting, another day of punishing labour for sixpence, but tonight at least you have a roof, however wretched. In the geography of Victorian poverty you've mapped today that places you among the fortunate, sleep comes eventually, carrying you away from Wilmot's cramped cabin to your own comfortable bed in the present, where poverty is still real but rarely so visible, so concentrated, so inescapable as in those Victorian streets you've walked today. The Doss House and its denizens fade as consciousness slips away, but one image remains: children playing in the shadows of the nickel, their faces already old, their futures already constrained, and yet still somehow children, finding momentary joy even in hell's innermost circle. Unlike you in your safe, comfortable world, they never had the luxury of innocence. They were born knowing exactly what value Victorian England placed on their lives, which was next to nothing at all. A week at the railway works has put calluses on your hands and 6 shillings in your pocket. 6 hard-earned silver pieces that represent something you haven't felt since arriving in London. A tiny cushion against immediate disaster. Not security, not even close, but a moment to breathe, to consider options beyond the daily scramble for survival. What would you do, you ask Fitzgerald one evening, if you didn't have to stay at Wilmot's? The question comes as you both sit in the smoking room after another exhausting day. The usual symphony of coughs, arguments and strained laughter provides background music to your conversation. Fitzgerald considers the question carefully, as if it's both philosophical and painfully practical. There are better places, he says finally. Not good, mind you, but better. Like what? Model lodging houses, for one. Peabody buildings, Roton houses. Clean, decent, but they cost more. 6pence to a shilling a night, and they have waiting lists. You've heard of these places. Purpose-built accommodations created by Victorian philanthropists to provide respectable housing for the working poor. George Peabody, an American banker, and Lord Roton, a politician, each poured fortunes into constructing alternatives to the squalid doss houses that dominated London's poorest districts. Difference between them and here, Fitzgerald continues, is they're designed for working men trying to climb up, not broken men sliding down. They have rules. No drinking, no fighting, must be employed, must be clean. Many here couldn't qualify if they had the money, which they don't. Have you tried? A shadow crosses his face. Was in a Roten house when I first fell, kept it together enough to stay for almost a year, then lost my job, started drinking to forget, missed too many payments, broke too many rules. Once you're out, getting back in is, he trails off, the conclusion obvious. The model lodging houses represent Victorian society's limited attempt to address its housing crisis, well-intentioned but insufficient, reaching only those already disciplined and resourceful enough to nearly help themselves. What about you hesitate, not wanting to suggest what seems unthinkable, though you know many think it? The workhouse? Fitzgerald finishes for you. Last resort of the desperate. Been there too, briefly. Winter of '87. Coldest I've ever known. Thought I'd die on the streets, so I surrendered myself to Whitechapel Workhouse. His eyes take on a distant look, seeing something beyond the smoke-filled room. They strip you first, literally and figuratively. Take your clothes, give you a uniform that marks you as a pauper. Take your name, give you a number. Take your dignity, give you nothing in return. The workhouse was Victorian England's solution to poverty, a place that provided bare subsistence in exchange for crushing labour, deliberately made so unpleasant that only the truly desperate would choose it over any alternative. Men's ward was a long room with 50 beds, Fitzgerald continues. No privacy, not even a curtain. Food was gruel twice a day, oatmeal so thin you could read a newspaper through it. Work was breaking stones or picking oakum until your fingers bled. Families? Separated at the door. Men, women, children, all in different wards, might not see each other for months, even years. Some never reunited. Children died or were apprenticed out. Wives given different names after husbands died. Whole families just dissolved. The cruelty wasn't accidental but intentional, designed to discourage dependency and reinforce the Victorian belief that poverty was moral failure, deserving punishment, rather than misfortune, deserving compassion. How long did you stay, you ask? 3 weeks? Couldn't bear it longer, rather freeze than live like that. Many feel the same. That's why places like Wilmot's exist. Horrible as they are, at least you keep some shred of freedom. Your conversation is interrupted by shouts from the kitchen. A fight has broken out, 2 men arguing over some perceived slight or stolen possession. The deputy moves quickly to intervene, his methods more brutal than diplomatic. Within minutes, both men are on the street, their 4p forfeited, their night's shelter gone. There's always the street, William says, having quietly joined your conversation. His young face looks older in the dim gaslight, shadows emphasizing the hollows in his cheeks. Sleeping rough is the fate many Doss House residents fear most, not just for the physical discomfort, but for the absolute vulnerability it represents. Victorian London at night was a predatory landscape where the unprotected became prey. Did it for 2 months when I first came to London, William continues. Under bridges, in doorways, once in a half-built house. Rain's the worst, can't get dry for days after. Cold's bad too, but rain, he shudders at the memory. How'd you survive it, you ask? Found places. Parks aren't bad in summer if you can avoid the constables. Churches sometimes leave side doors unlocked. Railway arches if you don't mind the noise. Still, he pauses. Wouldn't wish it on anyone. Night never ends when you're out there. The streets claimed countless lives each winter. The old, the sick, the intoxicated, simply never waking from their frozen sleep. Yet for many, even that risk was preferable to the workhouse's guaranteed degradation. There are some charities, Fitzgerald offers. Salvation Army has shelters, church missions, ragged schools that let street children sleep inside sometimes. But charity in Victorian London was limited and conditional, often requiring religious compliance, sobriety, or demonstrations of deserving status. The truly destitute, especially those with addiction or mental illness, frequently fell through these threadbare safety nets. Knew a fellow who got into one of the medical studies. Barney chips in from nearby, apparently listening to your conversation. Some doctor at London hospital testing new treatments. Paid him 5 shillings to be a guinea pig. Came back with burns all down his arm but said it was worth it. Rented a proper room for 2 weeks. Such stories circulate through the doss houses, desperate gambles that occasionally pay off, more often end in disappointment or worse. Men who joined dangerous salvage operations after riverside fires, women who participated in dubious medical experiments, children who squeezed into spaces adults couldn't to clean machinery that never stopped moving. Best chance is to get out of London altogether, says an elderly man you've not spoken to before. His accent marks him as a rural migrant, like so many others. Came here thinking streets were paved with gold. They're paved with broken men instead. Countryside's hard too, but at least you can breathe. Yet leaving requires resources few possess. Train fare, knowledge of where to go, connections who might provide initial shelter or work. Most are trapped by geography as surely as by economics. As the conversation continues, a man enters the smoking room who stands out from the usual residents. His clothes, while simple, are clean and untorn. His face, though lean, doesn't show the hollow-eyed starvation so common here. He carries a small bag and moves with purpose rather than exhaustion. "Who's that?" you ask Barney. "Harper, used to be a regular, got out about a year ago, comes back sometimes, don't know why." Harper is soon surrounded by men pepper him with questions. "How did you do it? What's it like outside? Got any work leads?" He answers patiently, sometimes passing small coins to particular individuals. Later, when the crowd thins, you get a chance to speak with him directly. "Heard you made it out," you begin awkwardly. Harper studies you, clearly a newcomer, not yet fully broken by the doss house system. 8 months here, he says. Worst time of my life, but maybe saved it too. Showed me what was waiting if I didn't change course. What did you do? Got lucky first. Found regular work at the docks, saved every penny I could, rented a room, tiny, shared with 2 others but not a doss house, kept saving, then really lucky, foreman noticed I could write, moved me to keeping inventory, indoor work, steady wage. Harper's story is the exception that feeds desperate hope in places like Wilmot's. For every man who climbs out, hundreds remain trapped, and dozens more arrive daily to replace those who perished. Or why come back? You ask the question most puzzling to you. Harper's expression turns complex. Guilt, gratitude, discomfort, all mixed together. Reminder, he says simply, of what waits if I slip, and he hesitates. Some helped me when I was here. Try to return that when I can. Before leaving, Harper presses something into your hand, a small card with address. Dockmaster's always looking for men who can read and write, he says quietly. Not just muscle. Show him this. Say I sent you. The moment feels significant. A potential fork in your road, a possible way out that didn't exist minutes earlier. You pocket the card carefully, acutely aware of its disproportionate value relative to its size. That night in your cabin, you think about alternatives. The workhouse with its institutional cruelty, the streets with their deadly exposure, the model lodging houses with their waiting lists and requirements. Even Harper's miracle of escape required both extraordinary effort and extraordinary luck. Through the thin partition, you hear Fitzgerald's voice, softly reciting what sounds like a letter he'll never send. My dearest Emily, the children must be so grown now. I think of you every day and dream of returning when I can provide properly again. Please tell them their father loves them, that circumstances and not choice keep us apart. His words trail into muffled sounds that might be suppressed sobs. The human cost of Victorian poverty suddenly crystallizes, not just physical suffering, but the severing of fundamental bonds, the slow death of identity and connection. The next morning, an unusual sight greets you in the kitchen. A well-dressed gentleman accompanied by a harried-looking official. The newcomer stands out absurdly in his fine coat and top hat, like an exotic bird landed in a chicken coop. Health inspector, Barney explains under his breath, comes twice a year to pretend he's enforcing standards. Owner always knows in advance, of course. Place got cleaned yesterday. First time since Christmas. You watch the charade unfold, the inspector making notes while carefully avoiding anything he'd actually have to report, the official guiding him away from the worst areas, the deputy hovering nervously until they leave. A lot of talk about reform these days, Fitzgerald comments, as you head out for another day at the railway cutting. Articles in the papers, speeches in Parliament, been going on for decades. Streets and doss houses look exactly the same. He's not entirely right. Changes were happening, though glacially slow by modern standards. Victorian social reformers like Charles Booth, Henry Mayhew and Octavia Hill were documenting urban poverty with unprecedented detail. Their work was gradually shifting public opinion, challenging the comfortable belief that the poor deserved their fate. New buildings were rising, not just the philanthropic model lodging houses, but entire planned communities at London's edges designed to relocate slum dwellers to healthier environments. New laws were being passed, tentative steps toward housing standards, sanitation requirements, limits on overcrowding. But for men like you, Fitzgerald and William, such changes might as well be occurring on another planet. Your world remains Wilmot's creaking stairs, the railway cuttings punishing labour, the constant mathematical calculation of pennies earned versus survival purchased. That evening, something unusual happens at the Doss house. A visitor arrives who isn't an inspector, resident, or owner. She's a middle-aged woman in practical but decent clothes carrying a large bag. Or nurse, Barney identifies her. From the London hospital, comes once a month to treat what she can. Owner hates it but can't really stop her. She knows too many officials. The nurse sets up in a corner of the kitchen, creating an impromptu clinic. Men line up, some with obvious injuries from workplace accidents, others with the persistent coughs that signal tuberculosis, still others with conditions less visible but no less debilitating. You join the line, not for yourself, but out of curiosity. When your turn comes, the nurse looks up with tired eyes that have seen too much suffering to be shocked by anything Wilmot's can present. I'm not ill, you explain. Just wondered why you do this. Her hands continue preparing bandages as she answers. Because no one else will. These men can't afford doctors, can't take time off to visit hospitals, so either I come to them or they suffer until they can't work, then end up in the workhouse infirmary, which is just a slower death. Does it make a difference? She pauses, considering the question seriously. Sometimes I save a finger that would have been lost to infection. Sometimes I ease pain that would have driven a man to drink himself senseless. Sometimes I just listen to someone who's been invisible too long. She resumes her work. Small mercies in a merciless world. It's what I can offer. You step aside for the next patient, a man with a suppurating wound on his leg that has clearly gone untreated for weeks. The nurse cleans, medicines, bandages, each movement efficient but somehow still gentle. Small mercies indeed. Later, in the smoking room, you show Harper's card to Fitzgerald. Docs, eh? He examines it carefully. Good opportunity if it's genuine. Harper was always decent, so likely is. Would you come? You ask. If I get in? The question seems to startle him. Me? I'm not... He gestures vaguely at himself, as if his brokenness is visible. Don't do me any favours. I'm settled here. Settled in hell? Familiar hell, at least. That's the trap of places like Wilmot's. They break you until adapting to them feels like accomplishment, until leaving feels more frightening than staying. The devil you know becomes perversely comforting. William, though, shows interest when you mention the possibility. I'd go, he says immediately. Anything to get out of here. Been trying for months. You make a pact. If the dockmaster's opportunity proves real, you'll insist on bringing William too. Youth deserves a chance to be something other than prematurely old. That night, sleep eludes you despite bone-deep exhaustion. The card in your pocket represents possibility, fragile, uncertain, but real. Yet possibility itself is dangerous in a place designed to crush it. You think about the nurse with her small mercies, Harper with his survivor's guilt, Fitzgerald with his letters to absent family. Different responses to the same brutal system, different ways of preserving humanity when everything conspires to strip it away. Through the thin walls come the familiar sounds of the doss house at night. Coughing, snoring, whispered conversations, occasional sobs. But tonight they sound different somehow. Not just the soundtrack of misery, but the persistent pulse of life continuing despite everything aligned against it. Each breath, each heartbeat, each morning rise despite aching muscles and empty stomach. Small acts of rebellion against a world that would prefer these men simply disappear. Simply continuing becomes a kind of victory when nothing else remains. Unlike your comfortable existence now, listening to this story in safety, the Victorian poor faced each day knowing it might be their last, that a workplace accident, winter cold, or simple starvation might end their struggle. Yet they persisted, enduring conditions that we can barely imagine, finding moments of dignity even in degradation. As exhaustion finally overtakes you, one thought follows into dreams, that perhaps the greatest poverty isn't lack of money or shelter or food, but lack of hope. By that measure, the card in your pocket makes you richer than you've been since arriving in this shadow world. Sleep comes at last, carrying you away from Wilmot's creaking cabin to whatever tomorrow might bring. Railway cutting or dockmaster's office, continued struggle or first step toward escape. The doss house and its denizens fade as consciousness slips away, but something remains, a new understanding that survival itself in such circumstances requires a courage few of us in more fortunate times will ever need to discover within ourselves. The opportunity at the docks proves real. The dock master, a gruff man with hands like leather and a voice to match, looks skeptically at Harper's card, then at you and William. Harper vouches for you, he says, chewing on an unlit pipe. Says you can read, write and count. That true? You both nod eagerly. Don't need muscles for inventory work, need brains and honesty. You steal from me your wish for the comfort of prison. Clear? Another nod. Sixpence daily to start. Prove useful, might see eightpence. Sundays off unless a ship needs immediate unloading. Start tomorrow, 6 sharp. Just like that, your circumstances shift. Regular work, indoor work, work that won't break your body before your 30th birthday. It's not wealth or security by any modern standard, but in the Victorian context, it's a significant step up from the precarious existence you've known. That evening, returning to Wilmot's feels different. It's no longer your only option, merely your current one. With steady wages, better accommodations become possible. Not immediately, but soon. You share the news with Fitzgerald, expecting congratulations. Instead, his reaction surprises you. Good for you, he says, but his eyes avoid yours. There's something in his voice, not quite resentment, but a complex mixture of emotions. Happiness for you, perhaps, tinged with despair at his own inability to grasp similar opportunities. The offer to come with us stands, you remind him. Harper mentioned they need multiple inventory clerks. Fitzgerald shakes his head. My time's passed. Been too long, broken too much. He finally meets your gaze. Some men don't get out. That's just how it is. You focus on your chance. His words trouble you as you prepare for your final night at the Doss House. Is he right? Are some people simply beyond salvation once they've fallen far enough? Or is his despair itself the final trap, the moment when possibility becomes unimaginable? You're still pondering this when a commotion erupts downstairs. Raised voices, then a woman's shout loud enough to carry through the building. Curious, you descend to the kitchen. A woman stands arguing fiercely with the deputy. She's perhaps 30, though hardship makes precise age difficult to guess. Her clothes are threadbare but meticulously mended, her face lined but determined. I know he's here, she insists. Just let me see him. 5 minutes. No women in the men's doss, the deputy repeats flatly. Rules are rules. You recognise her, Bessie, the woman who asked about Tom weeks ago. Her desperation has clearly mounted since then. Please, she begs, her voice cracking. The baby's worse. Doctor says without medicine. She can't finish the sentence. Not my concern, the deputy says, unmoved. Your man makes his choices. Something breaks in Bessie at these words. The desperation hardens to fury. Choices? What bloody choices? Work that breaks him for pennies, a room we can't afford, watching his child starve? Her voice rises with each question. You know nothing about choices. Several residents have gathered, drawn by the confrontation. Tom is notably absent, likely hiding in the smoking room or perhaps not even in the building. I'll fetch him, you offer impulsively. If he's here. The deputy glares, but doesn't stop you as you head to the smoking room. Tom is indeed there, hunched over a mug of tea, clearly aware of his wife's presence, but unwilling to face her. She's desperate, you tell him. Something about medicine for the baby. Tom's face twists with shame and anger. Think I don't know. Think I want my child sick, but what can I do? Work's been scarce. What I get barely keeps us in that one room. Then tell her that. She's fighting for you out there while you hide. Your words strike home. Tom straightens slightly, then nods and follows you back to the kitchen. The reunion is painful to witness. Bessie's relief at seeing him quickly morphing to anger. Tom's defensiveness giving way to guilt. Their argument plays out in harsh whispers, conscious of the audience watching this private drama. 4 days you've been gone. Looking for work, wasn't I? What good am I without money? Your son's been asking for you, crying for his dar. And what good's his dar without a penny to his name? Better he learns early that's all a man's worth in this world. But beneath the recriminations flows an undercurrent of genuine connection. Two people bound together not just by circumstance, but by choice, by love, stubbornly persisting despite everything arrayed against it. Finally, Tom reaches into his boot and extracts a few coins, his entire savings hidden even from doss house thieves. "It's all I have," he says quietly. "Take it, get what he needs." Bessie accepts the money, tears now freely flowing. "Come home," she whispers. "Just come home." "Tomorrow," he promises. "I'll try again tomorrow." After she leaves, Tom sits heavily at one of the kitchen tables, his face in his hands. You hesitate, then join him. "Hard," you say simply. He looks up, eyes red. You've no idea. Watching them suffer, knowing it's on you to fix it, knowing you can't. Rather take a beating daily than feel that. Your son's lucky to have a father who cares. Tom laughs bitterly. Lucky? With a useless drunk for a father and a tenement room he shares with 3 other families? Some luck. The encounter opens your eyes to a dimension of doss house life you hadn't fully considered. Most men here aren't solitary figures cut adrift from all connection. Many have families, wives and children they can't support, can't live with, but can't abandon either. For women in Victorian slums, survival required different strategies than for men. Without access to many jobs that could support a family, women faced impossible choices: work 16-hour days in laundries or factories for starvation wages, send children as young as 5 to work in dangerous conditions, turn to prostitution when all else failed, or watch their families starve. "Women have it worse," Barney says later when you mention Tom's situation. "Men's doss houses are grim, but women's," he shakes his head, "different dangers altogether. Though you've never seen one, you know women's doss houses exist, often on the same streets as men's, sometimes even in the same buildings with separate entrances and strictly enforced segregation. Friend of mine worked at one on Flower and Dean Street," Barney continues. "Said they'd get young country girls arriving with nothing but hope and a train ticket. Within weeks, most turned to the streets. Not because they wanted to, mind, because hunger's a powerful motivator, especially when it's not just your own." The women's doss houses held their own particular horrors. While men faced violence and theft, women contended with those plus sexual predation. Older women often protected younger ones, creating makeshift families among the abandoned and desperate. "Different class of women had different options," Fitzgerald adds, joining your conversation. "Educated women might find work as governesses or companions. Strong women might do laundry or factory work. Pretty women." He doesn't finish, but doesn't need to. For many women, prostitution was not a choice, but the only alternative to starvation. The East End streets teemed with women selling the only commodity they possessed when all else was taken from them. Many lived in the same doss houses where the Ripper found his victims. Elizabeth Stride, Catherine Eddowes, Mary Jane Kelly, women whose lives of hardship ended in spectacular violence that finally forced comfortable London to briefly acknowledge their existence. Some women's doss houses are just brothels with a different name, Barney says. Owner takes most earnings, keeps the women in debt, can never earn enough to leave. Children in this environment faced the bleakest prospects of all. Born into poverty, many never experienced anything resembling childhood as we understand it. By age 6 or 7, most worked as chimney sweeps, factory hands, street sellers, or scavengers in the toxic mud of the Thames at low tide. "Oh, saw a girl yesterday, couldn't have been more than 10, William says, selling matches at midnight, 10 years old, alone on Whitechapel Road in the dark. You've seen them too, hollow-eyed children with adult expressions, bodies stunted by malnutrition, hands aged by labour." In the Victorian slums, childhood was a luxury few could afford. "Ragged schools take some in," Fitzgerald offers. "Teach them to read, give them a meal, let them sleep on the floor sometimes. Better than nothing." The ragged schools, charitable institutions for destitute children were among the few bright spots in the dark landscape of Victorian poverty. Founded by well-meaning middle-class reformers, they offered basic education and occasional shelter to children who would otherwise receive neither. "My youngest went to one for a while," Tom says, rejoining the conversation. "Learned his letters before the cough got bad. Teacher said he was clever." Pride briefly illuminates his tired face before darkness reclaims it. What good's clever in the East End, though? Clever doesn't fill bellies. The conversation turns to families who manage to stay together despite everything, crowded into single rooms in tenements, sharing beds, cooking meals on tiny grates, existing in spaces barely adequate for one person, let alone 5 or 6. "Lived in a room like that when I first married," Barney recalls. 10 feet by 12, shared with my wife's sister and her man, curtain down the middle for privacy, hot as hell in summer, freezing in winter, but we were together, at least. These family accommodations represented a step above the doss house, but carried their own horrors: complete lack of privacy, children witnessing everything from marital relations to childbirth to death, infectious diseases spreading inevitably through households where quarantine was impossible. "There's one building off Dorset Street," Fitzgerald says, "where 60 families share a single water pump and 2 privies. Children play in gutters running with waste. Women try to keep clean houses in places where cleanliness is impossible. Yet even in these appalling conditions, women created homes, tiny corners swept clean, a salvaged flower in a cracked cup, bed sheets mended until more patch than original fabric, small assertions of dignity and humanity in circumstances designed to strip both away." "My mother kept the whitest doorstep on our street," William says suddenly. "Scrubbed it daily no matter how tired she was from the laundry. Said a clean step meant we weren't beaten yet." The night deepens as these conversations wind through the smoking room. Men who rarely speak of families now share fragments of lives beyond the doss house walls. Wives maintaining homes without husbands present, children growing up barely knowing fathers who leave before dawn and return after dark. Communities of women supporting each other when men cannot or will not. A different picture of Victorian poverty emerges, not just individual suffering, but the fracturing of the family unit under economic pressures so extreme that simply remaining together became nearly impossible. "Tomorrow's my last night here," you remind Fitzgerald as the conversation finally winds down. "Still time to change your mind about the docks." He shakes his head. "Some ships sail without certain passengers. That's life. What about your family, the ones in your letters?" Pain flashes across his face. "Better they remember who I was than see who I've become." You start to argue, but stop, recognizing his choice as one made from a warped kind of love, the belief that his absence hurts less than his broken presence would. It's wrong, perhaps, but understandable in a world that measures a man's worth by his ability to provide. That night, lying in your cabin for the penultimate time, you think about Tom and Bessie, about the match-selling child, about all the fractured families trying to exist in a system that makes togetherness nearly impossible for the poor. The familiar sounds of the doss house wash over you, coughing, snoring, murmured conversations. But tonight they carry different meanings. Each cough might belong to a father worried about children he can't protect. Each whispered conversation might contain memories of homes lost, families separated. Each silent moment might hold grief too deep for expression. Sleep comes fitfully, dreams populated by Bessie's desperate face, the match-selling child's ancient eyes, Tom's coins extracted from his boot, his last dignity sacrificed for his son's medicine. Morning brings your final day at the railway cutting, exhausting work now tinged with the knowledge of impending escape. You, William, and Johnson, who secured a recommendation to the dockmaster from another worker, labour with renewed energy, already feeling halfway free of this back-breaking existence. That evening, returning to Wilmot's feels surreal, like visiting a place that was once home but no longer is, though you haven't physically left yet. You notice details you've stopped seeing, the permanent grime ground into the kitchen tables, the desperation poorly masked as camaraderie, the resigned acceptance in most faces. "Will you remember us when you're respectable?" Bunny asks with a smile that doesn't quite reach his eyes. "I'm going to the docks, not Buckingham Palace," you respond, but you understand his meaning. The gulf between even modest stability and the doss house's precarity is vast in Victorian London. "Remember enough to help when you can," he says more seriously, like Harper does. That's all anyone can ask. In the smoking room, you're surprised to find Tom still present. "Thought you'd have gone home," you say, joining him. "Tomorrow," he replies. "Got work today, roofing job, 4 shillings, enough for medicine and a week's rent, going back with something to offer, not just empty hands and apologies." His relief is palpable, a man granted temporary reprieve from the worst kind of helplessness. For a few days, at least, he can be the provider his Victorian identity demands, can hold his head up in his own home. "What about you?" he asks. "Heard you're dockbound tomorrow. If all goes well." "Will, if Harper sent you. He's solid gold, that one." Tom hesitates, then adds quietly, "Could ask if they need roofers. When you're settled, you promise to do so, understanding all too well now how vital such connections are, how a single introduction can mean the difference between destitution and survival." The evening passes with similar conversations, requests for future help, advice on dock work, congratulations tinged with envy. The Doss House community simultaneously celebrates your escape and resents it, hopes vicariously through you, and fears your success will highlight their failure. Fitzgerald remains notably absent until late evening, when he finally appears looking unusually resolute. "Been thinking," he says without preamble. "Maybe you're right. Maybe it's not too late." The change is so unexpected you're momentarily speechless. "Saw something today," he continues. "Woman with 3 little ones, husband dead in a factory accident. She's taking in washing, schooling the eldest at home, keeping them together somehow. Made me wonder what my Emily's doing, if she's managing the same miracle. You want to come with us tomorrow?" Want to write to her first. Tell her I'm finding my way back, slowly. Ask if there's still a place for me, even if it's just to help, not as husband proper yet. He looks simultaneously terrified and determined. But yes, I'll try the docks, if they'll have me. It feels like victory. Not just your own escape taking shape, but potentially his as well. A tiny breach in the seemingly impenetrable wall between destitution and dignity. As lights out approaches on your final night, you take a moment to truly see your cabin, the narrow bed that's been your only guaranteed space, the thin walls that have contained your dreams and nightmares, the worn floorboards that have supported you when nothing else would. For all its squalor and discomfort, Wilmot's provided what its name promised. Lodging. Not home, never that, but shelter when the alternative was none. That counts for something, even if the cost was paid in dignity as well as pennies. The bell rings for lights out. Darkness falls on your last night as a Doss House resident. Tomorrow brings new challenges, but also new possibilities. Work that won't break your body, wages that might eventually secure better accommodations, perhaps even the foundation for something resembling a future. Sleep comes easier tonight, carrying you from Victorian London's harshest realities toward whatever tomorrow holds. As consciousness fades, one thought lingers, that for every person escaping places like Wilmot's, countless others remain trapped, not through lack of effort or character, but through a system designed to create more broken bodies than it can or will accommodate. Their struggles continue in darkened cabins throughout the East End, in tenement rooms where families crowd together, in women's doss houses where safety is as scarce as privacy, in streets where children grow old before their time. Unlike your comfortable existence, these Victorian lives unfold in shadow, unseen, unvalued, but stubbornly, persistently human despite everything that conspires to make them less so. Dawn breaks on your first day of freedom from the doss house cycle. You wake not to the harsh bell of Wilmot's, but in a lodging house one step up the Victorian accommodation ladder, a sixpenny house where beds have actual sheets changed weekly and partitions reach the ceiling. Not luxury by any standard, but after Wilmot's it feels almost respectable. Fitzgerald, to your surprise and relief, also secured a position at the docks. His education and former clerical experience proved valuable despite his years of decline, but he chose not to join you in the sixpenny lodging, instead using his wages to rent a tiny room of his own, the first privacy he's known in years. "Need to make myself halfway presentable," he explained, "before I write to Emily, before I dare suggest reuniting. Morning preparations feel strange without the frantic competition for washing space, without the deputy's impatient shouts to clear out. You dress in your cleanest clothes, still threadbare but newly washed, and head into a day that holds purpose beyond mere survival. The docks present their own challenges: strict timekeeping, demanding supervisors, complex inventory systems to learn. But compared to the railway cutting's backbreaking labour or the desperate daily hunt for casual work, it feels almost like opportunity. "Different world, isn't it?" Johnson comments during a brief break. "You've been checking manifests against crates of imported goods, tea from India, cotton from America, wine from France, the empire's wealth flowing through your hands while barely leaving a trace on your own circumstances." "Strange to think," you reply. "Most of London has no idea places like Wilmot's exist." They drink this tea, wear this cotton, never knowing who unloaded it or where those men sleep. "That's changing slowly," Johnson says. "More people writing about it now. Newspapers, books. Can't ignore what's being shoved in your face." He's not wrong. The late Victorian period was witnessing an unprecedented documentation of poverty. Journalists, social reformers, and even a few politicians turning their attention to conditions previously ignored or dismissed as inevitable. During your lunch break, you notice a well-dressed man observing the dock workers, occasionally making notes in a small book. Not a supervisor or shipping agent, his clothes and manner suggest something else entirely. "Charles Booth," Johnson identifies him with a nod. "Been mapping poverty all over London, comes to the docks, the factories, the slums, actually looks with his own eyes, not just theories from a comfortable study." Booth was among the most influential Victorian social researchers. His monumental survey, Life and Labour of the People in London, meticulously documented living conditions street by street, creating poverty maps coded by colour that revealed the true extent of destitution in the world's wealthiest city. Unlike many of his contemporary social theorists, Booth rejected the comfortable notion that poverty resulted primarily from moral failure. His research demonstrated that structural factors, low wages, irregular employment, inadequate housing, trapped even the most industrious in conditions they couldn't escape through individual effort alone. Heard he goes undercover sometimes, William adds, joining your conversation. Dresses poor, stays in doss houses, sees how it really is. Such immersive research was becoming more common. Jack London, the American writer, would soon disguise himself as a stranded sailor to experience East End conditions firsthand for his book, The People of the Abyss. Journalists were increasingly employing similar methods to expose what comfortable society preferred to ignore. As weeks pass at the docks, your circumstances gradually improve. Regular wages allow for small luxuries, meat once a week, occasional new clothing, a rented room shared with only William instead of dozens of strangers. You're by no means prosperous, but the knife edge between survival and disaster has dulled slightly. You maintain connections with those left behind at Wilmot's. Barney writes occasional letters, his daughter having taught him rudimentary writing before her marriage. Tom secured steady work through your recommendation and has moved his family to slightly better accommodations. Still a single room, but in a less decrepit building with an actual window. Fitzgerald's story proves most surprising. After weeks drafting and redrafting letters to his wife, he finally posted one, expecting rejection or, worse, silence. Instead, he received a reply within days, the paper tear-stained but the message clear. "Come home when you're ready. We've kept your place." "Never thought it possible," he confesses when sharing the news. "Thought I'd fallen too far. Been gone too long." "Will you go?" you ask. "Not yet," he says firmly. "Need to be steady first. Need to be the man they remember, or close enough. But now I have a reason beyond just getting through each day." His transformation is remarkable. Not instant rehabilitation, but a gradual reclaiming of dignity. He drinks less, attends to his appearance, saves rather than spending each penny as it arrives. The change comes not from some moral awakening, but from renewed connection, from having something beyond himself to live for. One Sunday, about 3 months after leaving Wilmot's, you decide to return, not as a resident but as a visitor, like Harper before you. The familiar street seems simultaneously exactly as you remember, and somehow smaller, less imposing. The building's sagging facade no longer represents inescapable fate but merely neglected architecture. Inside, little has changed. The same smell assaults your nostrils. Unwashed bodies, boiled cabbage, damp clothing. The same deputy guards the door, barely recognizing you despite your months of residence. The same weary men occupy the kitchen and smoking room. Their faces interchangeable with those you knew, though the individuals may differ. You find Barney in his usual corner of the smoking room. His health visibly declined since your departure. The persistent cough has deepened, his breathing now laboured even at rest. "Dock work suits you," he observes, looking you over. "Got meat on your bones now, colour in your face." You've brought small gifts, tobacco, tea, a bottle of decent gin to share. Not charity exactly, but acknowledgement of shared experience, of the thin line between your current stability and their continuing struggle. "Heard about changes coming," Barney says, after accepting a cup of gin with shaking hands. "Council talking about new regulations for doss houses, proper inspections, not just show visits, minimum standards for space, air, sanitation. Such reforms were indeed gaining momentum. The Victorian era's final decades saw increasing government intervention in areas previously left to market forces alone. Housing regulations, public health measures, factory safety laws, each represented recognition, however grudging, that industrialization and urbanization had created problems beyond individual solution. Will it matter, you ask, genuinely curious? Rules are one thing, enforcement's another. Barney shrugs, triggering another coughing fit. Might not help me, he manages finally. Too late for some of us, but the young ones, the children, maybe. His perspective surprises you, this capacity to hope for improvements he'll likely never experience, to value changes that come too late for personal benefit. It's a peculiar generosity of spirit in a place designed to crush exactly that. As evening approaches, the Doss house fills with its nightly population, men returning from whatever labour they've found, others empty-handed but with just enough coins for shelter. The familiar rituals unfold, queuing for kitchen space, settling disputes over seating, preparing for the night ahead. You notice a new resident, barely more than a boy, clearly experiencing his first night in such accommodations. His face shows the same shocked disbelief you imagine yours once displayed, the disorienting realization that this is what passes for shelter in the world's wealthiest city. Impulsively, you approach him. First night? He nods, eyes wary. Rough at first, you acknowledge. Gets not better exactly, more familiar. How long were you here? He asks. Few months, not anymore. You hesitate, then add, there are ways out. Not easy, but possible. His expression remains skeptical, but something shifts slightly. Perhaps the first fragile seed of hope that this represents temporary hardship rather than permanent condition. Before leaving, you visit the cabins one last time, climbing the familiar stairs that once led to your nightly prison and refuge. The sleeping floor is unchanged, row upon row of wooden partitions, creating the illusion of privacy without its substance. The air still thick with coughs and snores, the walls still thin enough to transmit every sound. Your former cabin now houses someone else, another body in the endless relay of Victorian poverty, another temporary occupant of a space designed for transience rather than dwelling. You wonder briefly how many men have slept in that bed since your departure. How many more will follow before any meaningful change occurs? The visit leaves you contemplative as you walk back to your current lodgings. Your circumstances have improved, yet the system that creates and maintains places like Wilmot's continues largely unchallenged. Individual escapes like yours do nothing to address the structural forces that ensure the Doss houses remain full despite their horrors. This tension characterized Victorian social reform. Individual charity in exceptional cases celebrated while systemic solutions remained elusive or actively opposed. For every philanthropist building model housing, dozens of slum landlords continued extracting maximum profit from minimum investment. For every investigative journalist exposing conditions, hundreds of comfortable citizens preferred ignorance to uncomfortable knowledge. Yet change was occurring, however glacially. The seeds planted by reformers like Booth, Hill and Mayhew would eventually bear fruit in the next century's more comprehensive approaches to poverty and housing. The documentation of suffering created a record too detailed to dismiss, too powerful to ignore indefinitely. In your rented room that night, with William already asleep in the bed opposite, you think about how quickly life at Wilmot's is fading from immediate experience to memory, the desperate calculations of pennies, the nightly search for the least bug-infested position, the morning competition for washing space, all receding like a fever dream as more stable routines replace them. You think about Fitzgerald, rebuilding himself piece by piece for the family that waits. About Tom, balancing precariously between family responsibility and economic reality. About Barney, whose escape will likely come only through death rather than improved circumstances. Each represents a different Victorian possibility: rehabilitation, persistent struggle, terminal decline. each navigating a system that offers too few exits from poverty and too many entrances. A letter arrives the following week from Harper, the man whose recommendation started your dock journey. He secured a position as shipping agent's assistant, another step up the precarious ladder. His note contains an offer to speak with his employer about potential opportunities, should your inventory work prove satisfactory. Such connections represent the most common escape route from Victorian poverty, not broad social change but individual patronage, the notice and assistance of someone slightly higher on the economic ladder. Not meritocracy but relationship, not systemic justice but personal intervention. You share the news with William, whose eyes light with the same cautious hope you feel. We could actually get somewhere, he says wonderingly, not just survive, but live. For most in Victorian London, survival alone consumed all available energy and resources. The luxury of imagining beyond immediate needs, of planning, saving, building, remained inaccessible when each day presented a renewed battle for basic necessities. Your thoughts turn again to those still at Wilmot's, still caught in poverty's relentless cycle. You make a private commitment that, like Harper, you'll return when circumstances permit, will extend whatever modest assistance your position allows, not from guilt or obligation, but from recognition of shared humanity, of the arbitrary nature of who rises and who remains trapped. This too characterized the Victorian response to poverty: personal charity alongside inadequate systemic solutions, individual connections attempting to bridge chasms too wide for such narrow spans. Winter arrives, bringing new hardships to those without adequate shelter or fuel. Reports circulate of deaths in doss houses from cold and disease, of increased crowding as even the most independent seek any available indoor space. You think often of your former cabin, wondering who shelters there now, whether they'll survive until spring. Your own circumstances continue their gradual improvement. The shipping agent's assistant position materializes as promised, bringing slightly higher wages and potential for advancement. William secures his own opportunity through diligent work and careful observation of those above him. Fitzgerald writes that he saved nearly enough to justify returning to his family, perhaps by year's end. Small victories in a war with too many casualties, but victories nonetheless. One evening, reading a newspaper account of parliamentary debates on housing reform, you come across a quotation from a recently published work, American writer Jack London's account of his time in East End doss houses. I contend that at least a man who does his day's work should have a room to himself where he can lock the door and be safe in his possessions, where he can sit down and read by a window or look out, where he can come and go whenever he wishes, where he can accumulate a few personal belongings other than those he carries about with him on his back and in his pockets, where he can hang up pictures of his mother, sister, sweetheart, ballet dancers or bulldogs, as his heart listeth in short, one place of his own on the earth of which he can say, "This is mine, my castle, the world stops at the threshold, here am I, lord and master." The words resonate deeply, articulating what you experienced but couldn't fully express, capturing the fundamental dignity denied to doss house residents. Not luxury or comfort, but simply space, privacy, security, the material foundations for humanity rather than mere existence. And in that moment, despite knowing how many remain trapped, how little has truly changed, you allow yourself to feel something like hope, not just for your individual future, but for broader possibility, for a world slowly awakening to conditions previously ignored or accepted. Victorian London's transformation wouldn't come through sudden revolution, but through this gradual accumulation of witness, documentation, and reluctant recognition, through ordinary people looking directly at what they'd previously avoided seeing, through the slow acknowledgement that poverty reflected social arrangement rather than moral failure. As sleep approaches, you think about the distance travelled from your first night at Wilmot's, not just physical distance, but psychological, emotional, existential. The Doss House shapes those who pass through it, leaving marks that never fully fade, but it doesn't necessarily define them, doesn't inevitably determine what they might become. In this final moment before consciousness fades, you hold both realities simultaneously, the persistent suffering of those still trapped in places like Wilmot's and the possibility, however fragile, of different outcomes, not forgetting the darkness while acknowledging points of light, not dismissing systemic failure while honouring individual resilience. This balance between acknowledging suffering and maintaining hope characterized the best Victorian responses to poverty, not sentimental charity that changed nothing fundamental, not fatalistic acceptance of misery as inevitable, but clear-eyed witness combined with stubborn belief in the possibility of better arrangements. Sleep comes gently, carrying you from Victorian London's complex legacy toward dreams. The Doss House recedes, its denizens fading into history's shadows, yet not forgotten, their struggles neither romanticised nor dismissed but held in memory as testimony to both